opinions expressed on this program are not necessarily those of the ownership, management, or staff of Magic 102.7 or Inter-Island Communications.
Good evening, Bermuda. Thank you for joining us here on Magic 102.7 on your Sunday evening for another edition of Insight. And tonight is going to be especially appropriate. That announcement just came through that the opinions and the views expressed tonight are not at all the opinions of the Inter-Island Communication of Station of Families. Definitely not Brother Glenn, Sister Gwen, or anybody else except myself tonight. And what is really a treasure is that we have in studio tonight none other than, I want to say the Grace can tell me no anyway, the great Dr. D, a very, very familiar voice in Bermuda, a very, very familiar voice in the medical field, someone who is definitely professional, someone who's been around for a long time. And if you listen to him, no matter when he speaks with authority. And what's even more amazing, I think, is that there is a significant breadth in what he does know. And for all of us who are not medical people, we know that there is so much terminology, whether it be actual medical conditions, whether it be the medicine. Obviously, a lot of the medicine is based in Latin, and they have to know all these things. And so I smile. Has been around, I don't know how long, he'll tell us how long it's been around, but as a doctor, and he still remembers all these things. And so I am always amazed at any medical professional that's able to run off a list of all these foreign names, the medications, the treatments, how they interact, and those type of things. And so tonight, we're going to be blessed to have lots of commentary from Dr. Dowling. And again, I want to emphasize that the opinions expressed tonight are definitely not those of the radio station, but it's a necessary conversation we're going to have, because we both believe, I believe for sure, that the listening audience needs to be comfortable in discussing these things that are, sometimes controversial, sometimes, upfront, sometimes scary, to be honest. And depending upon your station in life, they are very, very, very real. But before I go there, I want to say a couple of things real quick. One is to express condolences to the family of Miss Mossenden, who was laid to rest this week. Larry, Francis, and Carla, and the entire family, but those are the children, each of whom I know have had relationships with, in a positive sense, of course. Larry and I went to school. Chief Justice actually went to school at Work Academy when I first met him more than 40 years ago, and has always been a treasured friend. He's one who knows so much. And I'm trying to get him actually to come on station and be a guest. Given his role, he has to be careful as to, I guess, what he can say, but he has a tremendous story in and of himself. And so I wanted to certainly extend condolences. And clearly, no one's going to be able to do anything this week without an expression in regards to Sir John Swan. And what he did, again, larger than life, is he gave a letter to be distributed after he died. And so what I'm going to do, take a few moments and read it, just so that those who may not be aware will be aware. And before I say that, I will say this also, that in my personal life, I work at the airport, and in recent times, several months, I suppose, Sir John has been traveling back and forth, and I had the opportunity to talk to him almost every time he went and when he came back. And the one thing he said to me, which is relevant for everybody, is that dying is actually difficult. It's painful, but you have to go through it, unless, of course, it happens to you suddenly. He did tell me that, Anthony, dying is easier than being born. Being born, in his word, was that it's easy. Obviously, it's not easy, but it's easy from his perspective. And so right to the end, when we saw him, he was very much that statuesque person. Obviously, he was in failing health, but he had a choice to use a wheelchair or not. And more often than not, it was no, I'm not using a wheelchair. He would even get get the steps up the aircraft on his own. Tell me straight, no, leave me alone. I can do it by myself. And so I always admired that. But I was, I guess, like everyone else, surprised, but not totally surprised, that he did leave a letter. Now I'm going to read, maybe not read all of it, maybe I'll read it all. It's this. To the people of Bermuda, if you are reading this, it means I've taken my final leave from this island that shaped me, sustained me, and gave my life its deepest purpose. Though I am no longer among you in body, my heart has never known a home beyond these shores, and it never will. I was born in Bermuda, but more importantly, I was formed by her people, by your resilience, your warmth, your quiet strength, and your unwavering belief that even a small island can stand tall in a vast and often uncertain world. To have served you as Premier was the greatest honor of my life, but to belong to you was the greater gift. There were moments in my years of leadership when the weight of responsibility felt immense, when the choices before us were not easy and the path ahead was unclear. Yet, I never doubted the spirit of Bermuda. I have always believed that our greatest strength has been our unity, our ability to come together, not as factions or voices in opposition, but as one people determined to build a future worthy of those who will follow. To have been recognized as Bermuda's national hero was a distinction that humbles me beyond words. No title or honor could ever equal the privilege of earning the trust and respect of my fellow Bermudians. I accepted that recognition, not as a celebration of one individual, but as a reflection of the countless people who walked beside me, challenged me, supported me, and shared in the work of building a stronger nation. If my life is remembered in any meaningful way, I hope it is not for the honors bestowed upon me, but for the love I held for Bermuda and the unwavering belief I carried in the potential of our people. I have made mistakes. No life of service is without them. But I ask that you measure me not only by those moments, but by the sincerity of my efforts and the depth of my love for this country. Every decision I made, every step I took, was guided by a desire to see Bermuda thrive, not just economically, but in dignity, in fairness, and in opportunity for all. To the young people of Bermuda, I leave you with this. Never underestimate your power. You inherit not only a beautiful island, but a legacy of courage and perseverance. Protect it, challenge it, improve upon it. Let your ambition be matched only by your compassion. To those who walked beside me, colleagues, friends, and even those who stood in opposition, I thank you. You sharpened my thinking, strengthened my resolve, and reminded me that democracy at its best is a shared endeavor. And to every Bermudian, whether we ever met or not, know this. I carried you with me always, in every speech, in every decision, in every quiet moment of reflection. It was your hopes, your struggles, and your dreams that guided me. As I take my rest, I do so with faith in you. Bermuda's story does not end with any one leader, nor does it belong to any one generation. It lives in each of you, in your kindness, courage, and commitment to one another. I will always love my country and my people. Take care of this island. Take care of each other with enduring love and gratitude. Sir John W.D. Swan. As I'm reading this, it does bring thought to me in terms of clearly Sir John wrote that at a time when he knew that his time was near. And obviously we all take our time to read it and hear it and do all kinds of things with that. But what's more relevant is that he had time to prepare for his death, and many people don't. And he took time to do that, trusting, I know Dr. D is going to confirm this, took time in trusting that he also made right with the Lord, because ultimately that's going to be our destiny. And people may be offended by that, but that doesn't matter, to be honest. That is what it is. And so to his family, to Bermuda, we do in fact extend our condolences in this time of mourning. Clearly for his family especially, well, they would have known also that he was in declining health, but nevertheless, he was larger than life. We all remember him walking down the street. One thing I characterized, others did also, is that he was the one that kissed every baby along the sidewalk. You know, and that was him, the politician, to be honest. And more importantly, he knew so many people, and he touched so many people. And for many people, it was a matter of, no matter when you were in his presence, you were the only thing that mattered at that point in time. And so to his family, to Bermuda, and to everyone, as we go through this week, I'm sure we'll obviously hear more and more about his service. But again, condolences. Dr. D, you want to give a few words on that note, or good to go?
Well, I want to thank you for having me on first. I was listening to the talk show this morning, actually, Mr. Sullivan's show, and he replayed one of, I think his first show had Sir John on, so I got to listen to him talk as well. I've always been impressed by when he speaks, he always has something relevant to say, and what he has to say is not a black thing or white thing. It was always a Bermudian thing. And I think that's what made him extremely unique amongst all the other politicians I know, because most people tended to come on one aisle or one side or the other, and he found a way to bridge that. I've known a lot of people who are devout PLP people who will still talk kindly about him, and that's something very rare when you are, if you're part of the other party, it's almost like, well, then we can't ever see you in any other light but the enemy. But yet there was something about him that allowed people to see him for being a person who cared about his island, and not necessarily about the politics. Politics was his methodology for being able to fix things. And so for him, I think, and I truly believe, I truly hope that he was a believer. I didn't know him like that, so I don't know what his faith was. But being a person who is a follower of Jesus Christ, I do believe that, we have something after this, and what you choose to do after this depends a lot on what you do now. So, let his life have purpose and meaning here, but also make sure that when you said something about him saying how death was painful, it can be, I guess, depends on what you mean by that, like physically painful or like emotionally, like, oh my gosh, this is the end, those type of things. So I can understand that. And I think that's where, having a faith in something more than just yourself, having a belief that, if we are to do what we're supposed to do on this side, that this is just the next step. This is like I'm moving from a smaller 1-bedroom to a 3-bedroom, but it has to be something that's kept on your mind and on your heart and in your life all the time. And the world sometimes pushes back against that. And like you said, that's neither here or there. That's your decision to follow the world or follow something bigger or better. So I pray that he was that kind of person. I pray for his family, that they find comfort in just the love that people will show. I don't think he'll get a whole lot of, resentment for him being on this side or that side, but just him being a good man. So I hope that his family finds comfort in that.
Gotcha. And it's interesting how you put it in terms of the difficult. That was his words, by the way.
Yeah.
How difficult it would be, right? But how you just characterize it, life and death, in terms of, if you look at it from the point of view of a different phase. Even just what you just said, for example, it makes it that much more palatable.
Right.
If that's your belief, what I mean? So like you said, it's okay. Life and death is part of the process we have to go through.
That's the whole
and
thing.
so, absent the physical part of it, yes, if you're prepared for it, then okay, it is necessary. It's what you have to go through.
Somebody explained to me before. They said if you get yourself a 50-foot extension cord and you unwind it completely, your life here on Earth is the plug. Everything after that, from that plug to the end of the cord, is the afterlife.
Gotcha.
So we're so busy worrying about just the plug part that we forget there's so much more after this.
Wow.
So I pray that he's done what he needs to do to make sure his after this is
Gotcha.
fantastic.
Fair enough. Okay, so thank you for that. And obviously, I think Bermuda will go through its entire process of remembering him. And, I saw a post already today whereby, and he said it himself, he wasn't perfect. He made some mistakes. And in some cases, there were people, even in myself, in some cases, his political views were diametrically opposed to mine, right?
Fine.
However, that does not speak to him the person.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
you're right in terms of he was never mean. I mean, did what he had to do, but he was never mean or that type of thing. And so we extend our condolences.
You have a ring on your finger, which means you're married.
Yes.
And I'm assuming you and your wife don't always agree either.
And she might be listening, so that's an understatement. But
And you guys might be mean,
Yes.
but there's still something more. You're committed to the long term.
Yes.
And so you get over what an issue is different than a commitment to the relationship.
Sure. Gotcha. Understood. And so now let's turn from that for a minute, because what is ridiculous in my mind is I always start and end my show in terms of when you're out on the road, please wear a high visibility vest or a light or something so people can see you, because we want to avoid collisions. And in my mind, a collision is something that's avoidable. An accident is I'm driving on the road, I rub off a nail, for example, my tire pops and I get an accident. A collision is I'm driving on the road at high speed, not paying attention, and I strike something. That's not an accident, that's a collision. It's very much avoidable. My concern actually to Bermuda is this. We've already had many deaths on our roads, right? So far, I think it's 9 so far this year. My honest comment is that guess what, Bermuda? Prepare for more.
Yep.
The reason is no matter what I say and others say, it seems as if everybody's going so fast, they don't even, something's wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And when I was coming up today, I drove up from St. David's to Hamilton, like not long ago, half hour ago, let's say. And actually, I took a video clip of 6 bikes riding in front of me.
Mm-hmm.
They are the electric bikes that are not licensed, so there's no license plate. And my concern is that we have entered a period of absolute craziness.
Mm-hmm.
Right before school comes out, so there's going to be many more people on the road, right? Those bikes are not licensed. The people that are riding, many of them are riding at high speed,
Mm-hmm.
racing each other and just riding all across the road, popping wheelies, all this kind of stuff. And that was between, say, the pizza house at St. George's up into the police station. They turned off right before that. That entire stretch, all of the road. And then when I came across by the airport, others were riding at high speed. I came across the causeway, the same thing, almost all the way up to Hamilton.
Mm-hmm.
People riding at high speeds. And so unfortunately, we are probably going to have to prepare ourselves for more road fatalities. What's even worse than that, though, as bad as that is persons who will injure themselves and have a lifelong disability, needing rehabilitation, family support, all those kind of things, and that's where you come in. And so it's a negative, I guess, but a positive if one person listens and slows down as a result of that comment.
You know, I was, before my life as a physician, my family business was renting motorcycles.
Yes.
So I have been aware of the risk of riding on this road for a very long time. And not only that, but when I moved back to Bermuda in 2002, I was on the Road Safety Council for quite some time. So I got to hear both sides of the debate on, you know, should we be letting tourists rent bikes? You know, should we be making, should we get the tinted visors, things that we talk a lot about, but there never seems to be a political will to keep moving through this. And I don't know whether it was yourself or somebody, you had somebody from the Road Safety Council, and I saw that. And once again, it sounded very, you know, the council has a lot of ideas, but transitioning, in fact, I think I called, actually. I remember, because I remember this conversation. The transition behind an idea that has good merit and making it part of the legal system of running things, there's always been historically some kind of disconnect between there. And so, you know, there's going to be more problems sometimes because we haven't, you know, we keep complaining about stuff, but we don't do it. And to a bigger thing, humans are human. They make decisions. Decisions have consequences. We live by those consequences and we die by those consequences. And it is sad. I feel bad for families. I feel bad for the individuals because I'm sure when they made a risky decision on the road, they weren't intent on ending their life, but yet there they were. And so I think, you know, you can't just add more police because people are going to make decisions whether they'll just find a way to avoid them.
Correct.
But in the case where you're talking, especially with the electric bikes, where I think I heard today somebody was talking about their electric bike can get up to like 30 miles an hour or something like that.
No, more than that.
I think there comes a time where we, as the country of Bermuda, decides there's a speed at which we have to decide this becomes a registered vehicle, that you have to have certain things, you know, in place before we feel comfortable letting you on. And that license, even if it's a free license, but being able to identify who you are on the road, because if you could write that down, you could have reported that person and have consequences. We don't have enough consequences for stuff. People, you know, I know people in the police department who I keep saying, well, why do I keep seeing bikes on the road, you know, that are just to the side for months and months and months? In my day, which I feel old, you know, those got picked up, and if you didn't get it, you know, you got fined, and then they sold your bike and all that. Oh, we can't do that anymore. Or they're overwhelmed and overworked. There has to be a change in some basic stuff. Otherwise, we're going to continue having this. And even if we do all that, human nature is that, especially males versus females, we find a way, and, you know, all we can do is pray for them and just remind them that you're not the only one on this road. And even if you don't hurt anybody else, we don't want you to get hurt.
And interesting, real quick too, before we go into our subject, is that it's now it is no longer just males. It's male, female, old, young, black, white, rich, poor, Bermuda, non-Bermuda, everybody riding bikes now completely crazy. And driving cars too, by the way, because I've seen an increase whereby cars they overtake at crazy points. Again, on the causeway especially, people just I don't know what they're doing, but anyway, that's it.
You sound
Okay.
like an old man. You talk like
Yeah,
that.
I do, but I mean, 'cause, and I do understand the intrigue of speed, but sometimes, I mean, anyway, I'll do that now. So,
You were one of those people
Yeah.
when you were younger too.
Yeah,
so
I
you
got you.
understand that there's an actual, like I said before, there's a dopamine rush when you're riding at a fast speed and you feel some of that potential risk factor. That fires a lot of
Yeah, I got
energy
you.
in your body, and people live off it. We've just gotten used to being so dopamine high nowadays. We want it from anything and everything. That's why we scroll. That's why we look at pornography. That's why we're speeding on bikes. We want that hit.
wow. Okay, so, Dr. Dowling,
Yes, sir.
my first question to everyone always is introduce yourself in the way you want to be introduced, because everybody thinks they know everybody, but they don't. So how would you want to be introduced to yourself, to the listening audience?
So my name is Dr. Henry Dowling, otherwise known as Dr. D. I am a family practitioner here in the island of Bermuda. I've been practicing here since 2002 now. Trained in the United States. Grew up in St. George's and / Bayless Bay, because we moved from there to Bayless Bay. So I've been in Bayless Bay pretty much since double digits, since 10 years old and up.
Okay.
I come from a family of 2 brothers, me and my brother, and a married family of my mother and my father. And I am very blessed to be married to my wife now for 30 years with 4 wonderful children. And my passion is similar to Sir John, in terms of, medicine for me is a mechanism for helping people. Okay. And it's definitely not a mechanism for getting rich. But I think I learned a long time ago that there's more important things in life than just trying to make money. And your legacy is not a building or how much cash you leave. It's the people who leave, who remember you in a very positive way, and you've touched their lives. You've left a piece of yourself within them.
Okay, thank you for that. I'm going to smile and say that I used to be on the health council, right, way back when. And you say being in the medical field is not I don't know how you clear it, but I mean, not a way to get rich.
A mechanism for
A
getting
for
rich.
getting rich, which is interesting, because for a physician sometimes the question is, way back when was, how much is enough to earn? And the response was to be able to have a house here, a house overseas, afford to my children to go to private school, and to take a vacation every so often.
Right.
And so if that's your measure, then financially you got to be fairly wealthy to do those things.
Correct.
And so we may call that rich or not, but that's beside the point.
Well, so one of the things that I did learn coming back to Bermuda was there is a hierarchy of doctors here. And I am a family doctor. So I am the low man on the totem pole.
Wow.
In terms of not only financially, but also respect, which was not the same when I went to the States. Because of the system and the way that it is, the family doctor was the conductor of the orchestra. He made the patient, when they needed something, they came to us and we directed them to wherever they needed it, whether it was blood tests, whether it was hospitalization, whether it was a specialist, whatever the case may be. We moved that traffic out, and we were also responsible for bringing that traffic in. And they didn't jump around us. They always came back to us. So if they needed to see 2 specialists, that specialist would say, okay, I'm going to send a letter to your doctor saying, I think you should see this specialist. And so I always was kept in the loop. And from an insurance point of view, they had to go through us to get paid. So it was also another mechanism of controlling, is what I'm getting something that I need or something that maybe the doctor wants? Because sometimes I don't think you need to see that specialist for years and years and years,
Right.
just to do a blood test. I had a person the other day who called me on my show and said, hey, I had seen this doctor a year ago, and they called me and said, hey, I need to have to come back in and have a follow up. And so he went in and he said he saw him for like 8 minutes and then complained that he got charged $400. Now, was the service worth $400? It might have been. I don't know what kind of specialist or whatever it is, but did he actually need to be seen by that person? Versus I've had some of my patients that say, the specialist said that they wanted to see me. I said, well, how's everything going? He says, I then tell him you don't need it. It's fine. I'll look at it myself. So I help try to keep costs down. We help do that, which now, unfortunately, that is not the mechanism that is used. So in Bermuda, we had the surgeons, We had the subspecialists, which at the time was your internist, your pediatricians. I say that a little bit with a cheeky tongue. We had a cardiologist, and then the family doctor. And the power to move things through the system was in that order. So we could be very easily overridden by specialists here. And I'll never forget, because it still rings in my head, and my colleagues will remember how much it just irritated me. When we introduced MRIs here in the island, the insurance company limited family doctors to only like a head MRI, and anything else that we wanted, we have to send our patient to a specialist to get it done, which I thought was absolutely absurd, especially the fact that I had just been to the States. I used MRIs all the time. Most of my colleagues probably hadn't had the use of it. And yet here I was being told, because my degree was considered to be inadequate, that I had to now refer my patient to another doctor just to get a test. But that was an insurance mechanism for controlling cost.
So if I was your patient, and you said I need to have an MRI, you could not order the MRI. You had to go to a specialist.
So if it was a knee,
right,
let's say, I'd have to send you to an orthopedist.
And they would then order the
maybe they wouldn't. I don't know.
Right.
But insurance always thinks I'm going to do too much. Actually, they think every doctor is going to do too much.
Gotcha.
So in their minds, they need to find a way to control us from doing too much for the sake of doing it, and not for the sake of the medical treatment that is needed. So that becomes an issue, because nowadays I get a lot of patients who come in and say, you know what, I hurt my knee, I want to get an MRI. So I don't do that, because I know an MRI is not indicated medically. But it's like my friend got an MRI. I went on Dr. Google. Dr. Google said, it could be this, this, and this. And, I said, I want one MRI. And I said, well, what are you going to do with the MRI? Well, I just want to know. That's not a medical indication for having an MRI, just to know. At least you can get one. And I think there's some things that we could do to help facilitate both things. But you can get an MRI just to know, but should your insurance company pay for that just to know? Because if it ends there, in my world, an MRI is a tool to lead you on to the next step, i.e. I'm going to put you in the hands of a specialist, or put you in the hands of a physiotherapist, or because I think this is the potential problem that needs an MRI. If I don't feel that that is needed, then I shouldn't be forced to actually have to give you one. But if you as the patient feel, well, I hear you, doc, but I want one, then there should be some mechanism to define, okay, the patient's having an MRI because he wants to know X versus I think it's medically indicated.
And and I take the point, because now we as patients are almost much more advocates for ourselves, thinking that we know more than you.
Very much so. Very much so.
And so what do you do in that instance in terms of, I want an MRI, and if you don't give me an MRI, I'm going to another doctor. So,
and sometimes that happens. I mean, you have to be willing to, in the end, this is my license. This is my credibility.
Yes.
I can, so I try to work with my patients and say, tell you what, let us do A, B, or C first, and then if things aren't improving, then we can decide on an MRI, and especially early on in a situation, because MRIs don't actually change the outcome. I say an MRI is a picture. You have pain in your knee. It's not fixing the pain in your knee. All it's telling me is what's going on inside of it. It's not going to change the fact that I think you need an anti-inflammatory. It's not going to change the fact that I think you've torn something, so you need to go to the orthopedist. So these are the things that I try to, it takes time to talk to your patients. And it's the one thing insurance doesn't pay for, it's time.
Right.
So that's why a lot of times most physicians will just cave in.
Exactly.
Yeah, I can take 5 minutes. You came for 2. Thank you. Talk to you later. That's all they really wanted, but that's not necessarily what they needed.
Right.
So
one quick question. It happened the other day. A person I know, right? They said to me, "I'm going to the doctor to get a sick certificate for 5 days." That was on, like, let's say, I don't know, a Thursday. Guess what? They went to the doctor and got one for 5 days on the following Monday, I think it was.
it started on the Monday.
No. So it was Thursday. They
You
said,
went to the doctor that day.
no, they told me on Thursday, they said, I'm going to the doctor. I'm going to get a sick certificate for the next 5 days. And the next day, Friday, they did not come to work.
To work, right.
They then went to the doctor.
They got an appointment for Monday.
Yeah.
Okay.
and came back with the exact same thing they said. They got a 5-day sick certificate.
Okay.
And so my question is, how does that work from a doctor perspective in terms of I'm sick or whatever the case may be, right? Or whatever it is. I just call you and you give me a certificate sometimes. How does that work?
So I guess once again, that depends on your relationship with your patients. You know, you either trust your patients or you don't. If your patient's sick, your patient's sick. So a lot of time, I won't give a sick certificate without speaking to you. I need to at least, and nowadays with WhatsApp and all these other things, it's a lot easier to communicate. I don't necessarily need to see you to know that you're sick. If you come in and tell me that you have a runny nose and a headache, what is my exam going to change? It's not going to change anything. You have a runny nose and a headache.
Yeah.
And if that runny nose and headache makes you incapable of doing your job, then we have to say, well, how long do we think it's going to last, you know, before you think you can return to work? And, you know, that's where the history comes in. Well, it started on Tuesday. It's about 60% better. It's now Thursday. So I'll say, like, well, by Monday, I think you should be better. So we might say, okay, let's, you know, if you call me and say, I'm starting on Thursday, I'll say, I'll take you to Monday. And then if you're still not better, call me up and let me know, and I'll extend it.
Okay.
So this is where you have that relationship. But if you have somebody who just, you know, comes to you only for sick certificates and you never see them anymore, that's another conversation. You know?
Okay, no, fair enough. Okay. So, to listening audience, thank you again for joining us here on Magic 102.7 on a Sunday evening, on your Sunday evening, to have a conversation about healthcare and health insurance. And I am your host, of course, Anthony Richardson, but more importantly, our guest is Dr. D. Now, again, these are not the opinions or the comments of the radio station. They belong to me and Dr. D only. So listening audience, be aware of that.
Why do you?
Now,
I don't hear you say that in front of your other ones. Why do you feel the need to say that? It's interesting.
Because now we're going to do this. So Allshore made an announcement in February that they are going to require patients to go to the Phoenix group of stores, right? In order to get certain prescriptions free, no deductible, which means that if you don't go there, you're going to pay elsewhere.
Right.
I had a conversation about this with somebody else, and I said to them that what they're doing is restricting people as to where they can get this medication.
Correct.
Their response was, no, Anthony, they're not doing that. All they're doing is putting in place a financial difference. And I said, basically, is that if the financial difference is so big, which it is, you are restricting them because nobody is going to voluntarily pay a lot more if they can get it at a less expensive amount. And so the challenge for us to consider and talk about is the rightness or wrongness of what happened. And what's even worse, this is where the disclosure comes in, government and the health council said they'll put a pause on it in February.
They asked. They didn't have power.
In my words, they said they'll stop it. They'll ask them to pause it, right? And then come June 1, guess what? It's put in place. Nothing has changed.
Right.
And that's what has prompted me to have this show today. And I'll have a few more shows in terms of the whole idea now about health insurance, healthcare in Bermuda, and those type of things. And so today is the start of that. And so I want you to please, to number one, if you can, explain what Allshores have done and what the impact is going to be on a person who needs to get this expensive medication, who actually right now does not use the Phoenix group of companies to get the medication.
So, you know, this is not a new thing. So Allshore started this before the drugs. So for those who either are within their system or I think it was on Magic's list or something, there was a complaint even before this about the fact that this individual who had been either under BF&M or Argus, who had been going overseas for treatment at a particular facility, all of a sudden was told that they no longer could go to that facility once the merger occurred or whatever.
Yes.
And they felt this was outrageous, and how could they do such a thing when, you know, all this time they had been getting treatment, the doctors there knew them, it was their facility. So initially the pushback was, well, they almost said the same thing, we're not stopping you, but the alteration in what they would pay is a form of stopping you. That's like saying, you know, we're not going to stop you from getting on a plane to go away during COVID, but if you come back, we're going to punish you by making you stay in a hotel and paying $3,000 a night. Right. You know, there's a penalty that makes it almost the same outcome. So the idea is in network versus out of network. And this is where, me being trained in the States, I've seen this too many times. This was, there's a few of us who have been trained in the States that when I came back in the early 2000s, we saw this coming, and we were trying to tell doctors, if we don't put a stop to this now, the insurance companies are going to take control just like they've done in the States. So said, so done. Because this is the new financial model of healthcare that has been introduced into this island. And even though you're no longer into politics, the politics of the island had a lot to facilitate that movement because of the way that they changed the reimbursement schedules and who was responsible for taking care of what part of your healthcare. They liberated private insurance companies from the most expensive component of healthcare before COVID. I think it was 2018 or 2019. And in doing so, that was the start of them being able to move into this next phase of doing the in-network scheme that they're doing. Because basically in-network means that we have a relationship with these people where they are giving us deals. Now, you might not know the deal, and they might not say they have a deal, but there would be no reason for them to go to this place versus that place if it's exactly the same price. So there has to be something different. And in the end, this is a company. So it's about price. We both know so if I go to Johns Hopkins versus Brigham, they're both high quality. We know that. They both give good service. So why would I send you to one versus the other unless I'm getting a better financial deal at one versus the other? So we know that there is some kind of financial benefit that the insurance company is getting. And whether they admit it or not, that's just the reality of how business works.
Yes.
So Phoenix has somehow been able to, and I did speak to some of the pharmacists that aren't affiliated with Phoenix, who did say that they were asked to put out to tender about certain medications and what they could offer and all that kind of stuff. And yet they were very surprised when the Phoenix company, because up until then, Phoenix was selling these medications at a higher rate and stuff like that. So how in the world could they beat them? And to a certain extent, that also comes under the banner of monopolies that the Phoenix companies, BGA, had, because back in the day when there was only BGA, they had the monopoly on all the wholesale drugs.
Yes.
And they would sell those drugs to other pharmacies. And it's only been in the recent times that these pharmacies have been able to slowly start to break free from that monopoly and go and source medications at other places. But BGA still holds a lot of the monopoly ability to have the rights to bring in medications and sell them to other pharmacies. So that already puts them above the pack. And therefore they can afford maybe, okay, I'll sell you this at $10 here and there, but if you send me all your patients, I'll give it to you for $8. Because the volume now makes up for this difference that I was selling it for when I was only getting a patient here and there, and now I'm guaranteed. That's the benefit of networking, is they benefit. So that's why physicians in the States a lot of times will join networks of insurance companies, because the insurance company says, well, I want you to only charge my patients a lower rate, but I'll send you more patients. So this is just the way the system works.
And that's good because as you're talking, I made a note about this, right, about networks. And to listening audience again, I'm happy that you're here because I don't like to talk to myself, to be honest. But what I'll say is this. From my own experience, and well, you may be aware that my initial experience with health was when I worked for government way back when. So GHI was a key component of that, and then the Health Council, whatever. So when I first came aware, though, of the whole benefit of networks is that a local person had to go overseas for treatment, and the bill might have been $1 million. It was that much, right? And based upon negotiations in network, the bill was reduced to, I think it was like 700,000, a massive reduction.
Right.
And for the first time, I'm like, this makes no sense, because how is it possible that the bill was $1 million and came down to 700,000? Because that's a lot of money.
It is.
However, the benefit was, as you said, now there was greater certainty, and so it happened.
Right.
And since that time, I've always been aware of the networks, and so some have networks, they tie themselves to Canada some to the U.S. and those things. And so for the listening audience, I want them to understand that this is real, that money does, in some cases, dictate where you go and where you can go.
It dictates every case, not just some cases. Let's be real.
Now, see-
I don't know too many places that take you for free. So money does dictate. It's a matter of how much,
Right.
and your ability to pay it or not pay it.
Okay.
You know. And to give you an example, even locally, so as of beginning of this year, Future Care and HIP are now considered to have no copay for physicals, whereas before they had to pay. In fact, Future Care didn't even have physicals within their package, which it was ridiculous from the start. But anyway, so a physical on average would cost $380. Future Care, was it HIA who controls them, I guess it is. They said, okay, we want you guys to only charge our patients either $250 if there are just no problems, or $350 if they have a lot of problems. And although I don't know if it's actually been like legally mandated, we accepted that. So in a sense, they have become the in-network people. So we haven't changed the cost. So the cost of a physical is still $380, but we discounted for our HIA people, our Future Care and our HIP patients. So, and the guarantee, though, unspoken right now, is that you're going to pay me when I put my claim in. Don't be coming back and saying, well, we won't accept that. But if you come from Argus or if you come from another place, then we're going to charge you $380 and you will pay that. Now, before the in-network thing came in, if you were a HIP or Future Care patient and you didn't have the money, because just because I have HIP, I can pay $380. You know, so just because I have HIP doesn't make me poor. Just as a choice that I've made. But if you didn't have that ability to pay, the ability to change the bill the onus would fall on you to either ask, but not just complain about it, but say, listen, I don't really have that, or ask at the beginning. And a lot of the places will discount, knowing that, you know, as long as I can keep that $380, and sometimes that $380 is actually a cushion to provide you for when you don't get it or you get a lower amount. So sometimes the rich pay for the poor. You know, that's just the way the system works. So yeah, it might cost $1 million and maybe 5 people pay $1 million. But if they end up getting 7 for 700,000, they have to still ask for the $1 million. Otherwise they wouldn't have gotten the 5 million. The 5 people paid $1 million.
Got you. Okay. And so for Bermuda then, again, there's lots of comments about how this works and how it doesn't work, right? And I did see, I'm going to find out exactly where the quote came from. And again, this is why I keep saying about this, not the comments of the opinions of the station, right?
Right.
Because there was actually a comment that I took it as a quote unquote threat that Allshores have said that we should be lucky that they partner with a local group as opposed to them owning a group. At this stage, as far as I understand, they don't own any pharmacists. Right?
At this stage.
Exactly. And that's my point.
And there's nothing stopping them from doing it.
Well, but again, the question is, and for Bermuda to understand this too, that first of all, there's nothing illegal that Allshores is doing.
No, they didn't do anything.
Exactly. It's entirely a business arrangement, as you said. It's about money, right? And so they did, I'll find out where the quote is, but the comment was that they partnered with a local company as opposed to buying the pharmacists, right? And my point when I sent out the note today was that Allshores is owned by, it's a public company, owned by everybody, locals, overseas, and whatever. Whereas I know that the pharmacist, Phoenix, is owned privately. We think we know who owns it, but I don't know exactly who owns it, you know, all the way through. But it was interesting in terms of the public Allshores choosing to work with a local company, because now what's happening, even for you, I believe, is that I don't hear you complaining about the Phoenix group. You complain about Allshores.
I do.
Even though they had to come to an agreement to benefit. And so that's my question to you now. It's going to be, do you have a concern, though, that a local company, like if there's an advantage being taken of the general public, is not just by Allshores, it's by Allshores and Phoenix?
So it's, in the end, however, so back in the day when we only had one choice of a pharmacy, I had big problems with Phoenix running everything because there was nothing in place to protect the consumer. And government of the day, whoever it was, they might hear people complaining about insurance, but they would never necessarily hear the complaint of the Phoenix stores or the Phoenix company being the one who controls the majority of stuff. And we know that monopolies do not bring down the cost of anything. And I tell people the same thing with when I came here and we only had like 1 or 2 internet providers, and we were told that, you know, when we were spending $200 for like, you know, 10 megabytes, that was the cost, and they couldn't do anything about it. Hell, but when we got more internet service providers, all of a sudden they found a way to reduce the cost, because competition reduces cost. So I think giving other people the option of bringing in pharmaceuticals separate from BGA has worked to the advantage of Bermuda in general. And opening that up even more potentially gives those private consumers even a better ability to get cheaper drugs. There's a caveat to that, in that you can have a cheap drug, but are you going to pay it, or you want your insurance company to pay it? And sometimes, no matter how cheap that drug is, the insurance company has a commitment to this company. So they don't have a commitment to you. They have a commitment to their stockholders and making a good profit. And sometimes that interferes with you getting the service that you should think you should have, even if it costs less. And that's a big thing, because once again, I've seen insurance companies say to doctors, we're not going to cover you, even when the doctor says, I'll do it for free.
Well,
and I've seen that happen. And doctors were surprised. They wouldn't cover the doctor. They wouldn't cover the overseas hospital, because they were not part of their network. And for whatever reason, even when the patient said, I want this doctor. So I think, you know, there are things that we can do. And you know, my time in the United States and my time here and everything has seen so many things that would make good sense to put in place because of our uniqueness in terms of being a fixed population. Government actually helps the monopoly nature of insurance, because they limit how many insurance companies can be here. They you know, when people say, well, why don't we bring in this insurance company and stuff, they have to go through the government to get a license to do here. And so there is an ability for the government to say, well, if we want our people to be able to get other types of insurance, then maybe we need to make it easier for other types of insurance to come here. But they don't do that, at least not up to now. But that was when I came here, we had 5 different private companies separate from, I think, GHI and HIP and everything. We didn't even have Future Care. And now we're down to 2. So the idea of reopening the thought that we need to either open the doors to other types of insurance companies, or, because the other thing is that an insurance company cannot function here without a license, you attach certain provisions to that license for them to operate here. And the insurance company, the government and the Bermuda Health Council, because they operate under them, have not made it mandatory to fix certain things to the insurance license that they've done for the doctor's licenses. So say, for instance, they just went through a whole big battle, I think it was last year or the year before, where they were willing to put us in jail if we didn't give data. They didn't do that to the insurance companies. You know, and they had that ability, because in the end, that's how they used to get their data. They got it from the insurance companies. And all of a sudden, when the insurance companies were not providing them that, they didn't put the pressure on the insurance companies. They put it on the providers, which makes no sense whatsoever. Because we don't have the capacity to just print out data. I don't even know how to do that on my system, to give you large function parts of data. But you know, these quasi-governmental bodies are saying, well, we'll help you and we'll facilitate it, i.e. we'll use government money to give you the option of giving us data, rather than making the people who get the data every day, because they won't pay me unless I provide them with codes. So they know the data already. But yet there is nothing, there's no, they don't get punished for doing wrong to the people of the island. And I think you need a government who is willing to push back enough. And it might be like the American, when they said the banks were too big to fail. It might be the same thought process in the governments. Governments have a low testicular fortitude when it comes to saying, we're going to punish you if you don't do this, with the fear that if we pull our last card, they might pull out of here.
Which they will, but
But I mean, and technically it's easier for them to do it because, as you said earlier, our insurance companies that might have started in Bermuda
Yes.
are no longer Bermuda owned.
CMSC banks, yes.
Yeah, and so they have in fact, we don't have Bermuda banks.
Well, that's right.
So we've already lost that Bermudianness.
Uh-huh.
So our insurance companies are making that deal now so that if they had to pull out, they could do it. They could sign off very easy and say, you know what, we don't need that. Look at Friesenberg-Meyer. Friesenberg-Meyer used to have health insurance.
Yeah.
And at some point they said the money doesn't work, the numbers don't work. So we're no longer offering health insurance. British American, when I first started, I was with British American. British American started to give that up before they went bankrupt.
Right.
Because health insurance as an individual part of insurance is not a big money maker. They make their money off of a lot of the other insurance, but in Bermuda, it's a package deal. And I think that's where the government can actually hold some teeth. If you want to insure all this other stuff that you're making luxury lots of money off of, then you have to provide this type of insurance for our population.
And by the way, that's interesting. And again, this is not a show about Allshore, right? However, Allshore has been a public company. They have to issue their financial statements. And you'd be interested to know that they reported a overall income of $75 million. Of the $75 million, I think it was $10 million came from health insurance. But unfortunately, what I was trying to do is what they publish isn't just health, it's health and life.
Right.
But what I was trying to do
is parse that out.
Exactly,
Right.
to understand. And maybe it's not impossible that somebody from Allshores might contact me and say, hey, come on this show or let's talk some more because that's what I want. I'm not interested in the entire company. What I want to do is get information whereby we can talk more specifically about their health program. So Bermuda understands, for good or for bad, how much money is being made just from health.
So I think we have to understand also that Bermuda, the government of Bermuda made a huge mistake by giving or taking back the standard health benefit from the private insurers.
Okay, that's interesting.
They made a huge mistake in that the most costly aspect of health insurance was the standard health benefit, which included the hospitalization part of it. That is where most of the insurance companies can potentially lose a lot of money.
Yes.
And that's where the teeth come in terms of we have to work harder to try to keep those numbers down. So they will work with patients a lot more to keep them healthier, to prevent them from using that large part of the healthcare dollars. Once that left, their hands were no longer tied. Now, yes, they also lost the extra that came when they were able. So when you manage, so there's something called managed care.
Yeah.
So when you see on the TV, I think it's Medicare Plus or whatever in the States and stuff, that's managed care. That's not just giving you insurance. We're actually managing your health care to try to keep you healthy. Because if we can keep you healthy, the cost of keeping you healthy will be less than taking care of you when you're sick.
Right.
The private companies did that to a certain extent when the cost of expensive healthcare was on their backs.
Yes.
They don't do that much anymore because it doesn't matter whether you go to the hospital 5 or 10 times. It doesn't come out of their pocket.
Correct.
It comes out of the coffers of the government now. And that is because the government accepted that, thinking that those coffers were larger than they were. And the problem with that is, so they looked at that number that you said, $10 million, and said, well, we should be able to make that money.
Big mistake. Big mistake.
That's a huge mistake. And not only was it a huge mistake then, but that mistake gets worse over years because our people are getting sicker. There's more cancer, there's more dementia, there's more people who need more government services. And so the idea that $500 or whatever it is of standard health benefit is going to somehow cover all this illness is not real. And this whole idea of having universal health care, whatever that really means, doesn't really fix that. That's the problem. They haven't been able to address how does that make, the one thing when we started this whole thought process of, I think it was called Bermuda healthcare or whatever the case may be, and then they redefined it as universal health. It sounds prettier. People are accepting that more. But they never answered the original question of it because they used to say, Bermuda's 60,000 population and we're spending $700 and some million. That's not sustainable. We have to find a way to fix that. They don't say that anymore. What they say is that we need to find a way to give you cheaper health insurance.
And that's an interesting point in terms of, it's so many different aspects to this, right? But let me ask you what's on my mind. It's, you just talked about universal health care. And I think you said whatever that means. What does it?
I don't know.
Okay,
I don't think most people can answer what they mean.
What in your mind? Do you have a concept of a beneficial universal health care? And if you do, I'm going to ask you, what does it mean to you? What should it mean? What is a way to explain that you think makes sense from a medical point of view?
I don't know if I can easily. So the closest I could come to is what we have with HIP right now.
Okay.
There's a basic package. It's almost like, what's the basic for driving a car on the roads of Bermuda? You can own a car, but to drive it on the car, you're asked to get a basic amount of insurance, not just for your own benefit, but for the benefit of others who drive on the roads with you.
Yes.
To me, universal health care was supposed to, at some point, give you the ability to say, what is the basic needs of health care for people? But defining what basic is different for individuals.
Yes.
So initially they talked about, oh, we're going to get your teeth and all that, all of a sudden. But once they started looking at the numbers, they couldn't include that any longer. So dentists were left out of that. But yet, I see many people who are edentulous, who don't have teeth in their mouth, who would benefit from a proper diet, just socialize a standard of living by having teeth. But yet the idea that, once again, the money... The money is the thing.
Right.
If they can't make the money work, then they have to cut services. And this is how governments and insurance companies do it. When their numbers are exceeding what they expect, they either raise premiums or they cut services. And that's what we've been doing for a long time now. We cut services because we're reluctant to raise premiums because there's a political price to pay when you do that.
Right.
So, but we can quietly cut services. So when they gave the fixed cost to the hospital loses money because they can't necessarily work more to make more money.
Right.
So how do they save money? They actually work less, because when they work less, then the cost of doing services go down because now they're not paying all that overtime, that extended hours. So we have laboratories that I could, somebody comes to me at 5:30 with a urinary tract infection and I want to send some urine to the hospital. I can't do it because the lab closes at 4:30 or 4 o'clock. They only do inpatient labs at that point.
So
because they can't pay people to stay that length of time.
Okay. And so, sorry, to listen audience again, you can call in if you choose to do so. The number to call in is 297-1027. Again, it's an interesting conversation, getting caught up in it. Dr. Dowling's the guy when it comes to these type of things. And for me, it's good using my background and in some cases my common sense, I suppose, to ask these questions. And so you just spoke about a point which I think is very valid, which some people don't understand, I just understand it. It gets that insurance is a funding mechanism. It's a pot of money, effectively. And so in terms of offering the service, it's going to be, okay, Anthony, I have 10 people, that's my insured people. They're going to require whatever services. I estimate the cost of that and I charge them.
Right.
And then I charge them more for my profit, my rent, my this, my that, whatever it can be. And so you just explained it though in terms of, because the government cannot have these continuously increasing prices, they'll reduce the services. And so,
well, not the government, the healthcare facility. Well, it's a government facility. Yeah, it's a hospital. Correct. So they're a government hospital. Right. So yeah.
And so it may be an obvious question, but what impact is that having if the services are being reduced?
So I hope you don't need a hip. You're going to have to wait 6 months. I used to be able to get you in 6 weeks. If you need cataract surgery, you're going to be waiting 6 months to a year.
In Bermuda?
Yeah, in Bermuda. Because once again, we don't do any, that would be considered not an emergency surgery. So we don't do non-emergent surgeries after 5 o'clock because that's overtime. We can't pay all these. We don't have enough money to pay all this overtime. And we're not making any money off of the surgery. Whereas before, if we did a surgery there was a code for that and we got paid for that. Now we don't. So that's sucking the money out of our total amount of our big bundle of money that the government said, here, work with it.
And you're speaking now of the hospital or just generally?
I'm talking about the hospital.
So the hospital is currently not going to use its surgical suites after 5.
Right. Unless it's an emergency. Well, so emergency care only. But routine surgery has a slot and that's it. And say, for instance, let's say also, for instance, you have a urological problem that needs surgery. We have 3 urologists here. They only get, because we have a fixed now surgical time, we are trying to split up, I don't know how many surgery suites, let's say 5 surgery suites for a week amongst however many surgeons. So your surgeon might only get a half a day a week. But he's got 50 or 60 patients that need to be put on the schedule. So you're going to say, like, you're blaming the surgeon that he can't get me in until June. It's not because of him. He can do it anytime. The hospital's only giving him a half a day a week.
Oh, and so I've heard that before, not as clearly as that, by the way. What would the solution be, though, to allow the hospital to have surgeries like 7 o'clock at night or whatever?
You have to change the funding mechanism. You can't keep. I heard in the new budget where they said we're going to give the hospital more money.
Right.
That doesn't fix it. Humans by nature will get rewarded for doing things. If you just give them money, eventually that money runs out and they stop doing things. So you have to give them something for doing something. The hospital that funding mechanism has to go away. That's the only way. Otherwise, you're going to keep chasing the tail of the money.
Well,
because otherwise the hospital is always in debt. It's always trying to chase after things. And I'm not necessarily in love with the administrative component because they've been so used to doing things for a long time that they might not want to change stuff. And I told people, you remember the guys on the 5th floor, that all the administrators who make 6 figures a year, they don't see patients, but yet they make a large chunk of money that comes out of that hospital. But there's nobody to hold them accountable. See, this is where I was hoping that your the Bermuda Health Council would actually step in and be not just a regulator of the doctors, but a way of being able to bridge the idea of what do we need in this island and how do we make it better, and not just giving fruit out in the front of their stairs saying how wonderful you are, because that's not helping this. The system is collapsing. People don't understand how bad it is. If you get doctors who are allowed to at least talk to you without worrying about the work permit being pulled, you will hear some of the horror stories between either not being able to function in the hospital or the new mechanism for now working in this corporate world of healthcare under Allshores.
Yeah. Okay. And again, like I have so many comments, right? Anyway. So again, to the listening audience, understand that healthcare is in fact health insurance period. It's purely about funding.
Right.
It's all about money at the end of the day, in terms of I got to make enough money to cover myself. And now, you said it before, by the way, I never hear elsewhere, that one of your challenges as a physician is you're required to do so much admin that takes up your some of your work time, let's say,
right.
and purely for admin are paid for that. So therefore, to the extent that you have to do more admin, you can't see patients during that time frame, which means you make less money, and also there's just less time.
Right. So in the States, we used to actually have a person paid to do the admin.
An admin person, right.
Who would do the billing, and even now in Bermuda, because I didn't used to have a billing person.
Right.
I had my staff do some, because the billing wasn't that complicated. But the billing's become more complicated. The follow-up to the billing has become more complicated because insurance companies are easier being said, oh, you left this code out, we can't pay you. So there are more ways of making us jump through hoops that it becomes frustrating to just want to see patients. So I can understand why a lot of my colleagues say, you know what, I'm just going to go work for a company.
Yes.
Because, a large company has all this stuff in place.
Yes.
So all you have to do is go in the morning, see all the patients, write your notes, and leave. All the other stuff, I don't have to worry about it. The payroll tax, or rather, I filled out all the forms and all that. That's all on, I guess in this case, Allshores.
Right.
But it comes at a cost once again. So that doctor is no longer working for the patients. They're working for Allshore.
Yes.
And Allshore, to keep their profit margin going, needs to, once again, it comes down to, so they start to do things like, we're not going to charge our customers
yes, that's a
copay or whatever the case may be. So what does that mean? Because that takes away a certain amount of money from them. So how do you not reduce your profit margin? Well, I used to see 20 patients as a doctor. Now you have to see 30. Got to squeeze them in. So you start what we call patient milling.
Yes. 15
so,
minutes.
Yeah,
get up.
No, 15. You're down to 10 now because you got to see. Remember, you only have a certain amount of time. So you have to do that. They changed the way you pay. So the way you pay doctors. So you used to pay doctors X amount of money. Now what you do is you say, I'm actually going to pay you less, but I'm going to give you a bonus if you actually see X amount of
Whoa.
patients. So in the end, you might still end up making the same amount of money, but it's only if you keep up with all those patients that I'm going to send your way. So there's ways of squeezing that dollar from them, or you start getting in more doctors. So now our Allshore, I can't say August, Allshore has they are the largest provider of doctors in the island now. That's actually very scary to me.
Correct.
Because just like you had to say, well, what we're talking about has no consequence. People worry about getting them angry because they now, your weather's controlled by, funded by Allshore, all this stuff behind the scenes, Allshore is quietly funding with the idea that we're funding you. So, don't.
And, and again, that's an interesting comment in terms of any company with common sense is going to do something in the community to raise the profile so that you're right. Government, be careful. Hey, like, just be careful because if you touch this, it have negative consequences. So I got that. But what's interesting is, and Anthony, had a big concern, right, when August Allshore's BFM, whatever it was, when they said, you know what, if you're one of our insureds and you go to one of our doctors or one of our places, right, there is zero copay.
Right.
Everybody was happy. Okay, this is great. But like you said, I'm a financial guy. From a purely financial point of view, that somehow makes no sense.
Right.
Because it's not as if, like you said, they're going to make less money. They're going to find a different way. And so that means that those who are not their clients are going to either pay more or somewhere, they're going to do something different.
Right.
And as you said, which I'm not aware of, is that they may change how they pay doctors. And if the consequence has been that I had 15 minutes before, now I got 10 minutes, it's got to be less service at some point in time, because it's got to be a matter of, okay, Anthony, you're in there now. I want to talk to you, ask you questions, right?
Nope.
Your mind has got to be, hey, no, it's got to get out there in 10 minutes. And so
let's make another appointment, Anthony.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
We'll discuss that at another time.
Exactly.
I can charge the insurance company another thing. So remember, back when Bank of Bermuda was Bank of Bermuda, now it's HSBC.
Right.
You'd come with all your checks and everything and get them cash. But HSBC put in place 7 checks or less.
That's right.
Otherwise, you get out of line and you go back in line
Yeah.
again. And you could have nobody else. And yet, so that was their way of helping to control the flow of people in and out. So the same thing with this. It's a mill of being able to finance with the minimum amount. So now you can potentially get away with, they might potentially do less administrative. So there's other ways of doing it. So you narrow down your administrative staff.
Yes.
So you have less people doing more work. You try to change the cost of doing business. So Allshore's has two huge buildings. I don't see them being able to maintain where they are. And if they have a huge footprint, right now, having the other offices, they have Dundonald Street.
Right.
They have
Point Finger Road,
two on Point Finger Road,
right.
And they have Victoria Street, and then they have their 2 buildings there on the whatever that street
Wesley
is
Street.
on Wesley Street.
Yeah.
That's not going to stay. There's no way they're going to stay because they own the 2 buildings.
Right.
Why would they rent other buildings in the same footprint when they can combine everything under one and liberate some of that cash?
And again, I'm smiling now because I'm sure someone's going to call me at some point, right? But so Allshore's, and this is not about Allshore's, by the way, and I know one of you that worked there very, very well, and so you can call me later. So this is not to beat up on Allshore's, but this is some practical stuff now, and so they're going to move from the BFM building on Front Street to Wesley Street, and I was surprised. I smiled that day because when I drove across, now the building that used to be August actually has Allshore's as it's only building now.
There,
yeah.
right.
Before it was in the windows, coming soon, blah blah blah, but now it's there. So that's interesting.
And they've done stuff. So we used to have 2 different mechanisms for getting paid, for BF&M and Argus, and now as of this month, now it's like just one mechanism. They've gotten rid of the other. So they're slowly fusing into this one system. Right. But once again, monopolies. I mean, we have one electrical company here. There has to be mechanisms to control how that one group functions in an island that feeds everybody.
Right.
Argus was already the biggest insurer in the island, and now with BF&M buying them, then they have now become even pretty much the mainstay. I know CG still has a group of people, but there has to be a mechanism of putting controls on them, and the government has to be the only way of doing that. The government has to have the desire, the will, but they also have to have the right people to give them the idea of how to do that, because a lot of times government will outsource a lot of these things from other companies. So I always see them bringing in all these accounting firms.
Right.
You know, oh, we're going to change the system. Accounting firms might be really good about cash, but they don't know patience, and they don't know Bermudian patience. And a lot of times and this is where it gets me angry every time I hear how, you know, when back, you know, it's been almost 10 years now where when the Bermuda Medical Doctors Association told the minister of the time that to truly get a better ability to fuse stuff, we need to have a seat on the Bermuda Hospitals Board, the Bermuda Health Council, the Bermuda Medical Council. That was ignored, and it continues to be ignored. I thought it was me. That's why I quit, because I said, you know, this stuff started to become very personal.
Right.
So I said, let me step off and give it to somebody else who plays, you know, football with them or goes out to the bar with them or whatever. And it never changed. They still refuse to put doctors who they choose on. But you know what? There's a thing where if you have people who whisper in your ear of things that you want, then you're not doing a good service, not only to your company, but to your customers, which in this case is the people of Bermuda. If the ministers, and you know, I had to remind myself, so Gene Atherton, Trevor Monis, Walter Roban, Kim Wilson, Nelson Bascom, and Pat Gordon Pamplin. Since I've been back here. That's how many ministers of health I've gone through.
Okay,
and they've all had their own agendas and their own desires, and none of them really made an effort to get the Bermudian doctors on board. They kept everything siloed, which had made things worse. So back when we tried to petition, I forget which one was in it, I think it was Walter at the time, tried to petition about trying to keep doctors, your primary doctor in the hospital. It was deaf ears.
I remember that. Yeah. Okay. Got
It
you.
was totally deaf ears. And I still have patients that say, I didn't understand why. I said, you know what? We put out things in the paper and all that kind of stuff to push back. When we were part of Patients First, when we were pushing back about the Bermuda Health Plan, you know, at least we had enough momentum that it became a little bit untenable for them. But that's where they went away and brought it back as universal health care. It makes you feel cushy, you know, to say it that way.
That's interesting because, and so I guess what you're advocating would be that the what do you guys call the Bermuda Medical Doctors Association?
The president.
The president.
Right.
So normally what happened is you would say, okay, when the board's appointed, the president would be there. Whoever the president doesn't matter.
At the time, right.
Because what you would expect then is that you as the doctors would choose whoever you want.
Right.
Based upon whatever your criteria are. But that person by default would then be on the health council and be all over the place, as opposed to choosing you as Dr. D, for example.
Right.
Which eliminates the bias. And so that's what you guys are advocating for?
That's what we were advocating for. And you were on the initial health council.
Yeah.
So you remember they actually, because at back time we actually had two different medical doctor groups.
That's right.
And we had 2 seats on there.
Correct.
And we brought that up to Minister Kim Wilson, and she says, well, that's not in the legislation. So it was never put in legislation of us having those 2 seats, and therefore she had no obligation. So when we advocated for ourselves to say we want to be able to pick somebody, she said, give us 3 names and I'll pick one. And we wanted the president. So they put my name down 3 times. She refused. She not refused.
Got you.
So,
Okay.
I mean, that kind of goes along with that whole process in that, you know, we are going to do what we feel is in the best interest of, and I can't put it all on the Minister of Health because, and the reality is when I was president, the buck stops with me.
Yeah.
So in the current government, the buck stops with your premier because the premier ultimately gets to pick the Minister of Health and gets to kind of override and stuff. And he is not ignorant about what our wants and needs were. And I know some of the dynamics behind the scenes, so I understand that. But in the end, the people of Bermuda, so all of those names that you have, that I've said other than Kim Wilson, have moved on. Either they've moved on to glory or they've moved on to other, you know, fields of endeavor, making their thing. And the things that the decisions that they made still have ripples today.
Yes. Clearly.
And we are part of that rippling, one way or the other. I still have to take care of a patient regardless of whether the health insurance is there or not, whatever the case may be, but they get to go on with their lives. So that's where I'm saying if you're going to make decisions of healthcare for an island and a population so small, then you should have people who have skin in the game, who truly understand the long-term consequences. Most of my colleagues aren't trained in the United States. They know NHS and things like that. So the idea of the corporate healthcare system is very foreign to them. Whereas, I mean, I lived that stuff for too long. We had to make sure that our billing was in point. Otherwise, you know, people would get in trouble if you can't, you know, produce a bill for your patients.
And so is your comment that we, in my words, I suppose, but is your comment that we are now introducing the U.S. style of corporate healthcare, which is distinct from the European model?
So somehow we're trying to do this hybrid. So this is where we're wondering how this is actually going to work. This universal health care is more of the socialized system.
European model, yeah.
NHS, Canada, Europe, whatever. How does that work along the corporate medicine? Especially when you touted this as being, you want to make healthcare available to all.
Right.
But you're giving health insurance to all. You're not necessarily giving people care. That's what all you're doing. You're giving them a financial mechanism of accessing into the system. But are you actually making people healthier? I've never seen any data to suggest that poor people are sicker in Bermuda.
Right.
In fact, some people would say that poor people are actually healthier because they have more to lose by not taking care of their health. So, if you're saying health insurance is going to make your population healthier, I would push back. And in fact, there's data to suggest that the richer people are, the more unhealthy they are. Yeah. They just have access to, go and see a doctor when they but they eat worse. They engage in, horrible types of lifestyles because they can.
Yes. And they eat different food, like much more fatty foods and alcohol and all that kind of stuff. So I saw not the same, but I saw similar information. So, okay. Let me do this real quick. Very often, right? We hear that the hospital has an issue in terms of its ability to handle patients. And sometimes there's even criticism about the design of the hospital. And I'll smile now and say that when the decision was made or really considering building the new acute care wing, that's when I was on the board and me and some others were on the board, right? And just to be clear, the decision was that Bermuda needs to have an acute care wing. And there was some analysis in terms of what is the future projection of how sick people would be, and therefore I think it was like a 90 bed facility would work. And they also designed it whereby you would have single patient rooms to reduce the chances of getting sick in the hospital, MRSA. So that was the rationale for it. Now what's happening is that more people are more sick than we expected, than we predicted. But more importantly, people are now, because they can't afford health insurance, are taking people off the health insurance and using the hospital instead, because the hospital will
we'll see you one way or the other.
But it's free for people under 16 and subsidized for those that are 65 and older. And so some people are saying, you know what, let me quote unquote game the system by not having health insurance at all and just going to the hospital to minimize. And so that's part of the problem.
Why do you say game the system?
In terms of, that the hospital will treat children under 16 for free. So rather than go to a GP at all, who is on your health insurance, you take your uninsured child to the hospital instead. That's what I mean by game system. In terms of you're doing things which are not, they help you financially, but it's causing a big problem for the hospital.
Right.
And that they're seeing more people than they should.
So you have to also understand the hospital doesn't. It's interesting to know how this works. So before the whole fixed price for the hospital, we have aid subsidy and use subsidy, which is supposed to pay for those populations under 18 and over 65.
Right.
So I don't know if that mechanism is still in place. If they see that 16-year-old without insurance, they'll get paid out of that fund. So the fund was there because they wanted to cover.
Correct. It's always been there. Yes.
It's always been there.
Yes.
But so what's the difference now versus before? It's not that the hospital was unwilling to, and this is where I've said sometimes what government needs to do is actually tag the funding to the patient and not the place. So if you tag aid subsidy and use subsidy to the person and not the hospital, then that person can take that age and use subsidy and go see the doctor.
That's okay. That's and so sorry. So for the listening audience, right? What we're saying is this: let's assume government gives $1 million to the hospital to pay for the children under age 18.
Right.
Your point is that they can say, you know what, we're going to give $50 per child.
Right.
And the child can go wherever they want, and that $50 can be paid to you, for example, as opposed to hospital. That would actually unclog the hospital.
If that's where a clog up occurs,
part of,
because that's the same reason why you get elderly people stuck in the hospital, because the subsidy stays in the hospital. If they get transferred to a nursing home, the subsidy doesn't go there.
Right. Okay.
Even the patient, so the same treatment, but two different facilities. One gets paid by the subsidy and one doesn't. That is now the original intent of the subsidy was to prevent the most expensive care from landing on the backs of people, which was a hospital at the time. There wasn't any whole lot of other places to do anything health-wise. Now, because there are so many other aspects to healthcare that we have to reevaluate. Once again, you need people who are willing. I don't hear it. When I was on the Health Council, they never talked about stuff like this. The Minister of Health doesn't talk about stuff like this because it doesn't enter their mind about how can we do this differently and still actually take care of patients. I don't actually even think we need like clinics anymore because I believe the same principle that Dr. Hewitt Brown did when he closed the clinic could be applied generally. Anybody who doesn't have financial means, there should be a mechanism to give them a particular health card or whatever and have them access services wherever they have to go, whether it's to myself or whatever, and they get paid out of that fund. That's the same thing that happens with AIDS subsidy and youth subsidy, or they have indigent subsidy now. But we have different that's why it was almost not needed for this universal health care, because they said people were either uninsured or uninsured.
Right.
Well, once again, you said there are people who choose to be uninsured.
Yeah.
So, whether or not you make them have insurance or not is a whole different thing. There are people who say, well, I am healthy. Why do I need to go to a doctor, whatever the case? Or I have financial means. So why do I, if I'm over 65, if I go to hospital, my 70% of my bills covered, I can cover the rest.
Right.
So why do I need to get a future care? Doesn't make any sense to me. But for the people who cannot afford it, there should be a mechanism to pay for them to have the ability to see a doctor.
Right. And so do you support the idea of government then actually funding some of the health care?
Well, the thing is that I got to be careful. Government uses people's money. So
Yes,
there is
yes,
already a funding mechanism
correct,
for that.
yes.
Just move it out of the hospital realm and put it in the hands of the healthcare population of Bermuda.
And then you run the risk of further damaging the financial perspective of the hospital.
Yeah, but
you may bankrupt the hospital.
Well, once again, though, you're not. The reality is, the hospital. One of the things that I got pushed back when I was on the health council was because at one point there was the hospital came looking for more funding, but they couldn't produce paperwork to show where their money was going.
Correct. Yes.
And I was very opposed to that. I'm saying, wait a minute, the bank won't give me a loan without me proving where my money is going. Why are you guys giving the hospital more money and they can't show where they're making money or losing money? There's no way that we're going to support that. And if you try to do it, I'll get the doctors to go on strike. I think Jean Atherton was She said, "Thank you, doc, for your service. You're no longer needed here anymore." But the reality is, the hospital, and this is where I said sometimes we need to maybe consider changing the administrative system of the hospital, because they're so used to just getting a handout. Sometimes they need to reevaluate, because right now, say for instance, I had a patient who was in the hospital the other day, and they wanted the ER doctor to call me and let me know what's going on. They said, "We don't do that." So here we are. How do you work together when you refuse to work together? You tell that patient, "Oh, go follow up with your doctor when you leave." You put the hands in the patient has no idea what's appropriate or not.
Yes.
Now, it's not that they can't, it's that they choose not to. And they might feel overworked, and I'm not blaming them particularly. It might be individual, because every once in a blue moon, I get an ER doctor, and I say, "Thank you so much." I almost feel humbled by the fact that they would dare call me about one of my patients. But in working together, what we do is we can facilitate movement through the hospital. Well, my patient's been sitting there for 3 hours. Tell you what, tell them come over there. I'll stay a little later and see them if they come over now. These are the things that we should be working together as a system.
Yes.
But as long as you got the attitude that, "Oh, we don't need to deal with you," then you don't. And so we have no idea what's going on with patients in the hospital. We don't know whether you refer them. So you might refer them to a cardiologist, not even knowing that they have a cardiologist from me, because you never picked up the phone. And it costs the system money.
So is it that bad then in terms of
it's
the lack of coordination and communication?
Right, that's horrible. They choose not to communicate. Mr. Pearman was talking about how great it was that they had the Pearl system. This is their because from his point of view, that's the way to fix things. Just give everybody access to the computer system, then you could see what's going on with your patients. There's something different. I would not be able to leave a hospital when I was in residency without passing my patients on to the next doctor.
Right.
Don't matter what was in the system. A doctor needs to know some of the things that have been going on with that patient so that you can continue to treat that patient. So from the ER point of view, because a lot of time, unless there's no follow-up needed whatsoever, if there's a follow-up, you should be getting on the phone and talking to somebody about making sure that they have a follow-up. Hey, Dr. Dowling, I have a patient here. I really think he needs to be seen in the next day. I have a full load, but tell him come in ahead of time. So let him know I'll see him at 8:30 instead of 9.
Wow.
These are easy fixes, but you have to, it's a mindset change that has to come from the top down. And if it doesn't come, because I think if you have the proper people in place, then it's those people spread that influence downstream. So the right administrators make people feel very secure about how they should do things in the hospital. They feel that you are supporting what they do, that you don't treat them like, just minions or whatever the case may be. But if you sit up on your high horse and once in a while peep your head down, if you don't know your staff, I think we need better chief of staffs. We need better communication between chief medical officers. These are the people who supposedly run those groups. But are they actually doing it, or are they just kind of sitting in their office waiting for the check to come?
Well, and again, I have no idea, but that's
I don't either. That's the problem.
Understood. And it's interesting because, of course, you do have the huge interaction with the public. And by the way, listeners, I haven't even checked to see what questions are coming in, by the way, because I'm just excited about this.
I had somebody who said that the volume keeps going up and down on Facebook. I don't know if that's something you do or not. But
I don't know.
Yeah, so.
That's right.
Maybe it was popping in and out. So, but yeah, I think we have things will not get better until there's a mindset shift.
Right.
You can throw as much money as you want it, but until the mindset of the people who are in the system come together and finally say, we're not going to do this the same way. There's no way we can sustain this. Hospital cannot remain separate from the private doctors. Private doctors cannot remain separate from the boards that control things, and the insurance companies, whatever's left, and that's GHI too, has to be a part of this system and not just doing things on their own, because this system is broken already, and we only, the way that NHS and the Canadian system works is they just prop it up with more taxpayers' money.
Right, more money,
We don't have that.
Yeah.
We can't make our own dollars. So at some point, the system will start eating itself. And then what happens is we already have elderly that are left in situations that are not good for them. We don't have anything in place to take care of them. There's so many little things that we need to clean up that, this idea of just giving people a different type of health insurance isn't going to fix any of that. We're still going to be in the same mess a year from now if they've pulled the switch and pulled on this universal health care thing.
And so that's an interesting concept. So that right now, all shores have most of the doctors on the island, let's say. Right?
Correct.
What would your position be if government said, okay, fine, you know what, rather than provide universal health insurance, universal health care, government starts to employ more doctors and have more clinics rather than less clinics? So they'll hire you, for example. So rather than have you do your own practices, hire you somewhere else and let you work.
That's not going to work. So who's running the doctors? In other words, you say, so technically...
Allshore and government.
Yeah, so we work for Allshore and government now. We get insurance payments from them.
Yes.
So we already do that. But we decide how our time is, at least the private ones, not the Allshore one.
Right.
So we work for insurance companies now, unless we have private paying patients, which are very few nowadays. I have a few, luckily, but not many. So, and because of that, the money that is paid to me doesn't come from the patient. It comes from the insurance company, which is even worse because patients say, I pay insurance everything, so I shouldn't have to pay anything more.
Wow.
So why should I pay copay? I'm paying all this money for insurance because that doesn't reach my pocket. GHI pays me $52 out of $150. Where do you think do you think I should just eat the rest? Whereas the private company at least will pay me for the balance or whatever the case may be. Now, GHI has their own set of problems. They've been underfunding themselves for years, political reasons.
By the way, that's... I'm smiling now. I can't get fired because it's not my show. But anyway, that's interesting because I say to everybody right now, right, that GHI is the best insurance in Bermuda. Why? Because I knew that the government GHI owes a lot of money to the government.
Correct.
Which means that for all those that are insured under GHI right now, they have never had to pay the full cost of the treatment as a group.
Right. As a group. Correct.
And so that
when you
gets me in trouble. But yes,
they borrow money from the government. That means they borrow money from the people. They've taken our money.
Sorry, hold on, caller. Let me take this call. Good evening, caller. Welcome to Inside. What's your question or comment?
Hi, good evening.
Good evening.
Great guest tonight. Thank you.
Yes, the best.
I love listening to him.
Sure.
I recently had an appointment with a specialist, and it was in preparation for me to go in and get a quick outpatient thingy at King Edward. However, I was in the specialist's office for no more than 7 minutes, and that might even be stretching it. And I have insurance. I have GEHI, but my portion to pay was $200. I almost passed out. And I did make some complaints and inquiries, and I was actually told that doctors can actually charge whatever they want.
Yes.
So my first question is that in fact the case? And my second question, and if you answered this, then I do apologize, I missed it. What is the real reason why our own GPs cannot come into the hospital to to treat us? And I'll listen off air, but thank you so much.
Not a problem, ma'am. Not a problem.
Okay.
So, how much is the cost of, one of the things I think people have to get comfortable asking before they come to see the doctor is how much is the treatment going to cost? Correct. Because she's correct in that there is no limit to how much a doctor can charge for their service. And specialists, as a rule, will charge more for their visit than the family doctor or whatever the case may be. And some of this is, so say for instance, some of this is not due to the doctor, but it's due to the system. So say for instance, you have the government who, for some reason, and we as the doctors never knew, but the government enacted everybody having to get a physical for TCD every 10 years.
Yes, exactly.
That wasn't us. That was a governmental thing. And we never knew what the reason was or not, especially, if you're young or whatever the case may be. So people will come in saying, I didn't know I needed to get this. And then they get upset when we have to charge them for the service because it's not covered by insurance. So they have to now pay out of pocket $100 or whatever it is to get a TCD physical. And a TCD physical is not a very, extensive physical. It's a fairly basic thing. But I always tell people there's a cost of doing business for a doctor that is built into their time. So whether a doctor sees you, and times usually come in blocks.
Right.
So up to 10 minutes, it might be a certain block of time that they charge you, 10 to 15, whatever they charge you, they have blocks of time. And so, for that patient, when she said she ended up getting a block of time for that doctor might be $400.
Right.
So she used up one block. Even if it was up to 12 minutes, she only used 8 or whatever,
right.
But that was the block of time that she used. But if she had asked ahead of time, now the question becomes, did she even have a choice?
Right.
Because I think she said the hospital said that she needed to see this specialist. So, depending on what they were asking, sometimes the system puts you at a disadvantage of needing another outlay of money because the system expects you to do that. And I think that needs to be addressed too, but these are so many little parts that unfortunately is going to stay in limbo because there's nobody conducting the orchestra.
But I think that's an important question though, because the people think that the rates for doctors are set and they're not.
No, they're not.
Right? And so, for example, if you happen to be, let's say you're the best doctor and you charge $1,000 and the next person is not the best, but they charge $500, I have a choice as to go to.
Right.
And what the insurance is going to say is if you are a specialist, they may pay you a little bit more, but they're not going to pay you, or you don't have to only charge what the insurance company pays.
Right.
And I think that's a critical point for people to understand.
So, and I don't know whether what she said, if she said she had a particular type of insurance, but GHI.
Yeah.
So, say for instance, like at least for family doctors, I don't know about specialists. A family doctor only gets $52 from a GHI. My basic outlay usually is $150 for a visit. That's like a quick little 10-15 minute visit, although I usually never spend more.
I couldn't imagine much more than that, yeah.
But so for that one patient, they're going to come out of their pocket $100 for me.
Yeah.
So I can only imagine, a specialist who might charge $300 or something. If GHI is only going to pay out $100, then that comes out of your pocket.
Yeah.
And well, let me answer our other question. So way back when,
right,
and I was the president of the doctors in the hospital at the time. They brought in a chief of medicine, a chief of doctors in the hospital from away, Dr. Thomas at the time.
Yes, I remember Dr. Thomas. Yeah.
And he introduced the hospitalist concept to the hospital.
Exactly.
The hospitalist concept was, because initially what happened was you had your family doctor who admitted you from the ER and all that kind of stuff. They had junior doctors on the floor that would kind of keep an eye on things all during the day. And then if we needed to come back, we would come back the next day or whatever. If we needed to bring in a specialist, we would call the specialist and say, I have this patient I want you to see. But we were kind of the conductor once again.
Yes.
But from a hospital point of view, they made no money off of us. In fact, they lost money. Well, I shouldn't say that. So they made money off of the bed, but they had to pay for the junior doctor, because the junior doctor can't charge. He's a junior doctor, he or she, and they can't charge for my services because I didn't work for them. The hospitalist model, at least the one that they brought into Bermuda, they salaried doctors to come into the hospital.
That's right.
And every doctor that was salaried by the hospital, now every patient that they saw, that fee went to the hospital. And so the hospital could actually make money from the hospitalist to see the patients.
Yeah.
Now, insurance-wise, why would an insurance company pay two doctors to see one patient?
Yeah.
So it was an either or. Either your primary doctor is going to see the patient, or the hospitalist is going to see the patient. What Dr. Thomas did was he said, okay, if you want to keep your patient, you can't use the junior house officers. So you will lose the coverage of taking care of your patients during the day while you're in your office.
Right.
That means you'll have to leave your office if something happens and come back and take care of your patients. But the hospitalists will have access to the junior officers. So they can do it because it was a money. It's purely a money thing. So that was untenable because our patients now became second-class citizens.
Wow.
And I'd have to leave a patient that I'm with to go take care of a patient in a hospital. So most doctors ended up just saying, okay, I'm not going to do that. I'll just let my patients. And so over a period of time, the hospitalist system just took over. And we complained to the board of the hospital, and we complained to the government, and they were making good money.
Yeah.
Dr. Thomas brought that hospital out of the black or the red or whatever and made them a lot of money. Some of it not appropriate, but whatever the case may be.
Sure.
He used the model that is used today, the economic model of making money off of healthcare. And the hospital benefited from it greatly. But it wasn't sustainable. And in the end, if you listen to the reasoning from their point of view, they said, a lot, he told me, a lot of you doctors aren't taking care of your patients properly in the hospital. You're leaving them there for a couple of days and not coming in to see them and stuff, and that is not sustainable and not good health care, which I agree. But you're going to throw out the whole system and instead of getting rid of the doctors who are doing that. It made no sense.
Gotcha, okay. And just so you know, you may be aware of this already, one of the reasons why the funding model for the hospital was changed is because at some point in time, I think the number is correct, whereby the hospital had $100 million put aside, which meant that they had been able to take that much, quote unquote, access out of the system, which was deemed to be too much, which meant that you could reduce prices if you took that money out. And so that was part of the rationale for adjusting the model.
The funding
for
model.
The hospital. Yeah.
Right.
And so, but you're right, dude. There could have been a conversation that says, you know what? This is too much.
Right.
This is too little. Find a happy medium.
A happy medium.
As opposed to cutting it out altogether.
And once again, changing the mental model of how the hospital should be funded from their point of view. We need to step up. Do we need to tap into that money, or do we find new ways of making money?
Gotcha.
That is appropriate. Because, in the end, and once again, this is where politics gets in the way. The politicians have used that hospital to fund their political agendas. So, say, for instance, the urgent care.
Yes.
The urgent care was never meant officially to be a full-time facility. It was supposed to be initially, because of the hurricane situation when we couldn't even get over to that side,
right.
We wanted a facility over there that in case we couldn't access there, people on that side of the bridge would have access, that we could turn that switch on and have a kind of a mini facility set up where people do.
Sure.
But the government of the time used that as a political football and says, we're going to get you guys your own little, ER down there, so you'll have doctors down there. And the hospital, who already had problems with being able to staff their own ER in the hospital, didn't want to do it.
Gotcha.
But once again, it's a government hospital. You do it or
Yes.
we change who's in charge.
Uh-huh.
So they were forced to step in and take control of something that they knew they wouldn't be able to sustain, and it hasn't been sustainable. You know,
Yes.
it's not a full-time. It's slowly creeped out of the whole genre of being a full-time facility. It's not that. It was never meant to be that. But people come to expect it, and then once you give something to people,
Can't take it away. Yeah.
it's hard to take it away.
Wow.
You know, even if it's not meant, you know, if you're having a heart attack, you don't want to go to the urgent care. You need to get yourself up to,
Correct.
and you know, I try to remind people, we are a 22 square mile island. In the States, there are people who live further from a
Yeah.
hospital than our whole length of our island. So saying that it would be dangerous to go all the way from St. David's to our hospital is not
Great.
really the case. But once again, that idea that I feel comfortable knowing that something's there is very appealing. And once you give it to people and then you take it back, it becomes personal.
Yes.
Like, what is it about us that you feel you can take that from us? So I can understand why they felt the way they did, and there was some pushback again.
Yeah.
So the government caved and kept it open, but to what extent, really? It's not really open.
It's limping a bit. But okay, different conversation. What are your thoughts about medical flights out of Bermuda? Because that's what we do a lot of times, by the way. You'll be surprised. You may not be surprised, but the public will be surprised at how many times we have flights that come in to take people out for medical reasons, you know, all the time. Before, though, there was a Bermuda-based system.
There were two
whereby-
attempts to do that. Right.
And well, the first one I was aware of, which well, both of them actually, but you could actually get sick and be off island within 3 hours.
Yep.
However, now it's maybe say 5 hours. And the reason I understand was because, talking about it earlier, the network idea. So that the Bermuda service was not part of the network and therefore was not used by the insurance companies.
Right.
And that's why it folded.
Yeah.
And so
If you can't get paid, you can't keep your doors
right.
open.
And so
That's where the government could have actually facilitated that. They could have actually made, because say for instance, to be in network, and the insurance companies played dirty ball there, because to be in network, you have to have flight training to fly over certain mountain terrains or something.
That's crazy.
That's
Yeah.
crazy,
Yes.
especially for us. So there could have been things put in place to say, well, we're going to overlook that here in the island, but it was never done. And to tell you the truth, there might have been a true ignorance of the politicians of the time who were in control to say, you need to fix this. They had no clue that this was going on, but yet it caused the downfall of a local
Right.
air ambulance, which is what we needed. But we're now kind of stuck with having to go from overseas
Yeah.
to Bermuda to go back to overseas.
Correct.
And 5 hours is being generous, you know, but,
Yes.
you know, that, you know, especially when there are certain things, the last Docs for Dinner that Dr. Brown facilitated talked about some of the newer treatments about stroke protocols, that if you can get people seen within a short period of time, that you can actually reverse some of the damage.
Well,
That short period of time, I don't know if we're in that window. So there are going to be fallouts for being in Bermuda without access to a local, plane here that can do that.
wow. Okay. Fair enough. Again, to listen, audience, thank you for joining us here on Magic 102.7 on your Sunday evening for another edition of Insight. We're having a wonderful conversation. We have a few questions coming in, which we're trying to do our best to answer, I suppose. What I will try to do, to be honest, is have more than one show, because there is so much to talk about, especially when it comes to some of the fundamentals of both healthcare and health insurance, right?
And I've said many a time, I don't say this to be a lone gunman. I have no problem sitting across from the politicians who are in control or an insurance company, because if I'm wrong, I would like them to prove it to me.
Yes.
But, I put out offers on my show, on your show. I don't have a problem talking to people, because in the end, my feelings are my feelings, but my decision to be a doctor in this island means helping the island.
Yes.
So we have to work regardless. We don't have to like each other, but we have to work together. And otherwise, we're going to continue to go downhill. And I've seen where that doesn't end well for a lot of patients.
Okay. What I want to ask more fundamentally is that, okay, fine. Each of us as individuals, right? We are humans and things happen. But what's your comment in terms of the responsibility for us as individuals to do more or better or different within the context of our own lifestyle? As far as I know, like, for example, cancer, there are some things you do that can increase the incidence of cancer. Other things you can't. It just happens sometimes, right? But what's your comments in terms of the proactiveness of us as a people to be healthy?
So,
Can we do better?
oh, of course we could do better.
Okay.
Not just a Bermuda thing. This is a world thing.
Okay.
So we talked earlier about how the nature of having more actually can cause people to become unhealthy. Bermudians are by far, I mean, I see so much obesity that it's ridiculous. And it's strange because I see a lot even in the political world. So people who are making healthcare choices are also the people who are looking very unhealthy. But the problem becomes that's a choice. We don't force people to be healthy. We just try to give them mechanisms of paying for it when you become sick. You know, that's the irony of this whole system, is that it's not based upon trying to keep people healthy or get them healthy. It's about giving them a mechanism of paying for when they get sick. So let's bring in more cancer doctors. Let's bring in more kidney doctors. Let's bring in more endocrinologists. All that's after the fact, after you've gotten sick. You know, whereas if you pay doctors for that one thing that we said you need more of, time, then all of a sudden you change the dynamics. And patients now, they want what they want.
Yes, that's right.
And they have all the YouTube channels and all the, you know, the WhatsApps to show you what this stuff works for me and I should try this. So regardless of what I feel from my training, I can't force a patient to do something or not do something.
Right.
You know, one of the whole things behind this move towards the GLP medications that they talk about how expensive it is, you know, the whole move now between initially being about diabetes and now being about obesity and weight control, you see more and more incidents of things getting reversed on these medications. So it's got an indication for sleep apnea. It's got a indication for cardiac disease. It's got an indication now for arthritis of the joints. Whether or not those indications are because it actively works on those parts of the body or it just makes you thinner. You know, because obesity puts you at risk for cardiac disease, sleep apnea, arthritis of the joint, cancer. All of this stuff gets better when you're thinner. And these medicines are showing that. Now, once again, though, but are we going to pay on the front end or the back end? Right now, the insurance company is saying we're paying on the back end. We're not paying in front of the end. So they've now come up with you have to do a whole lot of jumping through hoops to get an insurance company to pay for patients who have obesity. They have to be morbidly obese, and then maybe they'll do it. But if you have, you know, as these indications come out, this is where I think we need, just like and I refer back to Belco. So the government has, I forgot the entity that allows them to either charge or not charge or do something or not.
The regulatory authority?
Yeah, the regulatory authority.
Yes.
We now need a regulatory authority for the insurance companies here in Bermuda because we only have two. They're monopolies. And for the good of the island, we have to be able to say, no, I'm sorry, you have to prove to us that you need to raise the cost of your policies. You need to prove to us that you won't cover, because if you don't cover something and something goes bad, it falls on the backs of the population. Right. So for the good of the population, you need, and a regulatory group has to be part of the doctors here, has to be part of the insurance company, has to be part of politicians and just regular Joe Blows that can have a say. Because I think way back when we were talking about changing system, there was actually one of the groups that talked about having, because if you say, for instance, now, if your insurance company turns you down, what recourse do you have?
Actually, zero.
Like zero.
Yes.
Whereas if you had a body that you could go to and say, my insurance company has turned me down for this and I feel that they're unjust, then you can get that overturned by them, and then they have to do that.
And I don't want to start this now, that's for sure, but clearly that was ivermectin during COVID.
That was definitely ivermectin.
And
during
that
COVID,
you are my doctor,
that.
right? But you are my doctor, and you said that, Anthony, based upon this, whatever the case may be, you prescribed ivermectin, and I would not get it. I could not get it. I could get it, but not be insured for it.
And even if I had reversed it a year ago, they would have paid for it without a question. So it wasn't a horse paste that that I was giving you. I was giving you an FDA approved medication. They never asked me what I was giving you stuff for. Never before, up until COVID. They just said there's a prescription from the doctor. Wow. I've had patients who got blood tests. A female patient who got blood tests for a PSA.
Wow.
Now, it was a mistake.
Yes.
But they covered. They didn't ask me, like, why are you doing a PSA on a female?
Gotcha.
So, but the reality is, money runs the roost, and money now has definitely shown itself definitely as being a contributor to how these insurance companies. And maybe it's always been that way. It just becomes more evident now, but when you have a government that says we want to take care of those who can't take care of themselves, what do you do for those patients who couldn't get ivermectin back then and didn't have the money to pay out of pocket? Because my patients that came to me had money, said, I don't care whether or not the insurance company, I'm not going to get sick.
Right. And
they paid for it out of pocket. So it wasn't that it wasn't accessible. They just had to pay for it out of pocket.
Wow. That's a scary thought, because I mean, and that's when we got down to the idea of me, insurance company, second guessing you, doctor, and it's a strange way, not strange. It's unfortunate, because it then means that even though I know that my motivation is money as an insurance company, I would have the goal to second guess your motivation as a professional doctor. But it happened.
Yeah, it happened, and it still happens.
And there was no mechanism by which that insurance company could be forced. Well, actually, there was a mechanism, by the way. However, it was not used, because remember, the Health Council does grant the license to the insurance companies to operate, and the Health Council could have stepped in to say, they could have put in place conditions for the insurance company license, because for sure the insurance company is not going to not operate.
So unfortunately, and I don't know whether you were on it at the time, the Health Council during COVID, I think, what did they do? They rolled out ICD-10 codes, and they gave, at least down on paper, they gave a mechanism for getting paid for doing telemedicine. Because at the time, insurance companies refused to do telemedicine. And then during COVID, when they were telling people you couldn't leave your house and stuff, the Bermuda Health Council rolled out this document that says that we, recommend that physicians be allowed to do this at this cost and everything. And they didn't even have the teeth to make it mandatory. It's just that everybody did it, which was interesting, because GHI was the first one to say, okay, we're not doing that anymore. And they just cut it off after COVID left.
Gotcha, okay.
Whereas people, once again, you give something to people, and telemedicine has always been part of what doctors were doing, but we couldn't do it to the same extent that we could before, because you couldn't get paid for it.
Right.
Once I leave my office, why am I going to take time for my family to do? That's why a lot of times, say for instance, we used to talk about, if you would just pay me to deal with my patient after hours, I can avoid them going to the emergency room.
Yes.
They just had a simple, urinary tract infection. But if you're not going to pay me, I can't do it. My time is worth a lot of money. I suffered a lot of 4 horrible hell years during my residency to become a physician.
Yes.
So that's why it irks me when I have somebody on a phone somewhere, or somebody sitting in an office who doesn't touch a patient try to tell me what's best for patient care. It just anyway. Yeah, well, I'm going to be nice.
I think to go back to one of my earlier questions is that, what are your thoughts about, so right now I'm a patient, I need, diabetic medicine, right? Allshore are saying go to the Phoenix and get it basically with no copay.
Right.
But I want to go somewhere else to get it.
Then they charge you, then they'll only pay for 50%.
What is your thoughts about government providing a subsidy to cover that difference, to ensure that there is free choice?
I don't think government should do that, because remember, government doesn't have their own money. They're using your money, rather than, once again, stepping up and making them become more transparent.
Okay.
I think government should be the people that say, okay, if you're doing that, we need to see the books. Because if you're forcing patients down the road, we need to see, is what you're doing legitimately justified financially? Because, and I know people all over talk bad about Trump, but one of the things that he did was that he was starting to put into place that insurance companies had to show their cards. If you're sending people here, we need to know how much you're getting paid to send them here versus there. Because once you bring stuff that's in the dark out into the light, people are very reluctant to do that stuff anymore. So if there is a little funny business going on between Allshore and, if Allshore is getting a 20% cut, or whatever the case may be, of sending stuff to Phoenix, and I'm not saying that they are or they aren't, but if they are, we need to know that. Because then I can at least say, well, my pharmacist is willing to take that 20%. So now I want you not to do 50%. You can add on that 20%, and then we're good.
Well, and without knowing the facts around that, you said it earlier, in terms of it's quite possible that Phoenix have simply said, you know what, we used to charge 100 and get 50 patients.
Right.
Allshore's are guaranteeing 100 patients. I can charge 40, and that's why that makes sense.
Right.
Which is, I think quite legitimate.
But here's the problem with that. So right now, if Phoenix runs out of medication, these guys bring in their own. So I can go over to these guys and get some medication, or these guys bring in their own. The reason they bring on their own is because they sell it. If you stop these guys from being able to sell the product, why would they even want to bring it in? So when Phoenix, because Phoenix doesn't always keep stock.
Yes.
So when they run out of stock, who are you going to?
Wow.
Where are we going? We don't have that access. Bermuda is still limited in terms of you can't get them shipped in the next day.
Right.
So, there's going to be a case, and it's happened already, where sometimes, they don't have it in stock, but, my CG guys, they bring it in their own supplier, so whatever the case may be, but they have overhead too.
Yes.
Because one of the things about drugs in Bermuda sometimes is that when you bring in a medication and it, you don't sell it or it expires, in the States, you just send it back to the manufacturer. We can't do that here. You got to eat that cost.
Oh, okay.
So, that's another thing that so you're going to have to start thinking really carefully. Is it worth me bringing in a whole bunch of Ozempic when I don't sell it anymore?
Wow.
These are just the reality of there's a price to be paid when you make something a monopoly.
Yeah.
And the control is a dangerous thing in this island because, in a larger system, if I don't like the way that Blue Cross Blue Shield does something, I have the option of going to Cigna. I have the option of going to this place. I got options.
Right.
There is no other option here. The government has allowed this to be narrowed, the field, for whatever reason. And so now you either play with them or you don't play.
And to be honest, that's another conversation, by the way, in terms of understanding in Bermuda, we are to a large degree a free market economy,
right,
or capitalist. There is nothing that stops me from doing anything, except, of course, there's lots of regulation. And so I want to emphasize the point that all shores are not doing anything that's illegal at all. They are actually doing what's right from their perspective as a business.
And they're doing legal and they're not doing wrong, and they're not doing illegal. Whether they're doing things that is appropriate for the good of the population of Bermuda versus their shareholders. And, their commercials sound really nice. I like their commercials. But are they really practicing? Because, we forget, this used to be two companies that had a lot of Bermudians.
Yes.
That no longer have a lot of Bermudians also. So there are Bermudians who lost their job by this merger as well.
Yes.
So there is a price to be paid when you create this kind of entity. When you go into HSBC now, you don't get to meet the manager and shake their hand and all that kind of stuff. You don't have your bank book anymore. You sit in a big line and you wait a long time to get seen. If you have more than 10 checks, then you get out of line, you go back in line. There's a price for this new world that we live in. And as an island, we were comforted is that it was a small, friendly, a mom and pop island, and that big corporate world has now entered into that, and I am not sure whether the population of Bermuda, maybe the young guys are good with it, they're fine, they're not sick, they go out and party and they'll worry about being sick later on, but it's coming. And Bermuda, as we lose more population through people moving off of island, through older people dying, through our young people not being encouraged to get married and have babies, we're going to have more of a financial storm that's going to be on our shores. And I don't know what the mechanism is of being able to take care of that. I really don't, because, even with the whole CARICOM thing and stuff that's coming on, we forget that Bermuda was kind of looked at as the snobby island. Because we had everything. We don't need you. And we didn't want to be like them.
That's right.
To be in that situation where, I tell people, this whole Ozempic stuff, they don't have that down in Jamaica. They don't, because the financing isn't there for that kind of stuff.
Right.
So the people there have to either buy it privately or go elsewhere. So we have so much here that we have to be grateful for, but it can easily be taken away from us, especially in this current situation, because, things are not going to get better in the track that we're on. We're not making more Bermudians, but yet we don't want to bring in foreign. We have to make a choice of which side of the field we're going to land on.
Sure. And real quick with that, by the way, from the accounting side, right? I think I told my son the other day that way back, maybe, I guess more than 20 years ago, 25 years, I guess it was now, we got to a point in Bermuda where there were not enough accountants. Went down the Caribbean and hired them, and they're still here.
Right.
And it's nothing wrong. They're doing a good job.
Of course.
So that is what it is. But what I would say to you is that there is, and again, I'm not picking on old shows, but they're the ones that did what they did, right? And so there is a conversation in terms of, remember, at first what happened was August and BF&M, they were fighting each other. One wanted to buy the other, vice versa, right? And there's a thing called a reverse takeover, whereby ultimately,
BF&M bought August, right?
When August initially wanted to buy BF&M, right? And so it's a interesting play on that in terms of understanding how these things work financially. Actually, what ended up happening was neither bought the other; they merged.
Right.
So rather than fight, they came together for the greater good. But with that, there is a lot of conversations in terms of why they are now. It was an insurance company. They now bought the medical practices.
And they before that. So Argus actually bought the medical practices.
Yeah.
So it wasn't even an Allshore thing.
Correct.
So we had a problem even with that because, we were already fighting the idea of how do we as a mom pop fight Home Depot.
Correct. And it wouldn't work. And so right now, I don't have it today, but there is a diagram, right, that shows all of the different entities that are owned by initially August and then BF&M, how they come together. And you're right. So August bought Island Health Services before that. And there's also a company, I think it's called Island Labs, whereby they own all the labs. And so far, just so the listening audience understands this, the insurance company owns the medical practices and the labs, which means, and now they're offering a discounted service if you stay in their network.
In the network, right.
Which means that now fundamentally, even though others may say no, based upon the financial mechanism alone, people are starting to do things differently.
Right.
And no matter what anybody says now, if I can go to the Phoenix companies and get my prescription cheaper, I'm going there.
Right.
And you as a doctor, I think said, or others have said already, that the challenge is going to be if Anthony gets some medications there and others elsewhere, the pharmacists might not realize that there are the indications between the two. So they may end up. So I may have problems now because you, as the pharmacist, don't know all my medications. So we may be having a problem going forward. Which is going to be horrible.
Right. But you know what? It's coming. Either that or they'll make it so uncomfortable for you to leave the network that you just do everything in the network.
And again, it makes sense.
It literally just makes sense. I don't like it, but it's for the good of my money, and we do things because it's easy a lot of times. But I still think that there's a price that we don't even realize that we're going to be paying. We already paid it in terms of the dynamics between the hospital services now are a lot more because you also have to remember that because the insurance companies no longer pay hospital care, it's easier to divert people to the hospital. So your cataract surgery might have been, when it was funded completely, they would decide, okay, maybe we'll just send you off. Now it's two different financial pockets it comes out of. So why do I need to pay out of my insurance? The private insurance would say, why am I going to come out of my money when you already have an insurance mechanism to pay for it? So unless there's an emergency situation that requires you to go offshore that comes out of my pocket, then you sit and wait like everybody else unless you have, one of the upscale. See, that's the other thing that's come with this. So what the insurance companies have started to do, which is also a mechanism in the States, is it's like the airlines. So there used to be a flat fee for everything. Now there's a fee for the type of seat, whether you want food or not, whether you have one suitcase or even no suitcase but a carry-on. They start having different levels of insurance. And we have to figure that out because some people will come in and says Argus or whatever, and we just charge and then later find out they had the lower tier service, so I should have charged them more money and I got to run after you and get that and every kind of stuff. So there's more complexities that get built into the system as they add all these layers into it, but it's the way of being able to make money one way or the other. And to a certain extent, I think, how do I put this nicely? So HIP and Future Care kind of bit off more than they could chew, I think. They added more financing to drugs this year or last year. 3,000 and 5,000. I think that was too much. I think it was too much in terms of, first of all, they don't look at their data properly to say what percentage of our people use this types of drugs, how many, do we need to tear up? Now that's where, so you have Medicare Part A, Part B, Part C. So you potentially what they should have done was introduce a layer of, so there are certain future care patients that need a higher level of medication care, because now what they do is they just cover 100% drugs. So if you want Tylenol, if I write a prescription, it'll pay for the Tylenol. So you have no skin in the game now.
Gotcha. Okay.
There's no, there's nothing for you to say, do I really need this? Do I need this one versus that one? Because I got all this
free,
money.
yeah.
It's free. I hate the word, but that's what's in their mind. And especially now with financial assistance on board, that's a whole other layer. Because, I had financial assistance paying for Viagra for a long time until I had to address and say, you do know what this medication is, But once again, if it's a prescription,
let it go.
Let it go.
Gotcha. Right.
And some people need it. So I'm not saying take it from everybody. But I have HIP. I don't need $3,000 worth of medication. And in the end, if it's a lot of people will be like, if I have it, I might as well use it.
A lot of people, yes.
That's a big.
I'm paying for
that's
it. Why
a
not?
big issue.
Yeah.
So with all the services, with an X-ray, with an MRI, I mean, my insurance covers it. So why can't I get it?
Exactly.
That kind of entitlement thought process is natural. But it comes at a cost. We keep thinking it's not costing us anything, but it's costing us something. So unless you give people the opportunity to put skin in the game, so even with the funding of insurance, back when they talked about the mechanisms, should we move to this universal or should we do this? One of the systems that I've always thought of is having people that have health accounts, so that they have their own money, so that if they want to do this, that's their money to do with. And an insurance company can say, we don't pay it, but I got my money myself. But health savings accounts work very well, and it gives people an impetus to be more in control of their own healthcare choices, because I might not want to go see an MD. I might want to see just my my massage therapist or whatever, and that's my healthcare for me, and that's fine. But if the insurance company's not paying for it, you still have a mechanism for doing that.
Okay, that's interesting. Well, we're past that time, past the hours they say, past the 2 hours actually, which has been very, very enjoyable. I want to say thank you for coming on by, for sure. And it's interesting to me with you, because you have your own show, of course. But for me, I think this was meant to be a different type of conversation. You on the other side of the mic and ask different questions, and also bringing clarity to me, because clearly some stuff I don't understand, and hopefully by extension to the listening audience. What I'm planning to do, though, is have these shows every so often, because I now want to bring to the forefront, right, some of these issues of healthcare, more so from a financing point of view, because I'm not sure we all understand this. And you hinted at it, and the government may say something different, right, is that I think there needs to be more clarity around this idea of universal health care.
I agree.
What exactly does it mean?
Right.
And what you explained it is, it's universal health insurance,
right,
not health provision.
Right.
And so I want to get clarity around that, because I think people think it's going to be, we all get it now.
Right.
But even at that, there's got to be a limit, because you can't all get everything. It'll be too expensive.
Right.
And so I know the government at one stage the government's going to actually fund some of the healthcare costs out of the general coffers, as opposed to paying the premium, which is like by default right now the GHI process. And so we need more information around that. I'm sure they'll come and talk about that. But to the listening audience, I want you to pay attention to what's happening with your healthcare dollars now, and for each of us to take more responsibility, personal responsibility for our own healthcare.
I agree.
Eat better, exercise, do what's necessary, so that we don't have ourselves, as you said it, to extent whereby there are so many chronic diseases.
Right.
I mean, we don't want to be critical for sure, but obesity.
It's a huge problem. It's a huge problem.
Some people can adjust, but others I think can. And so there are things we have to do, make different choices for better outcomes.
And medically wise, your body will respond better by not getting obese versus trying to reverse it. Because once you reach that level, you have changed the whole metabolic system in your body to that new set point. And so even if you lose the weight, there's still going to be your body pushing to go back up.
Oh, yeah.
And so that's why a lot of people, when they go on a lot of these medications now, they either have to stay on it to keep the weight off, because as soon as they come off of it, what we call food noise comes back to them.
Okay.
Even if they start to exercise and diet, you've altered your metabolic profile permanently. So you now have to live. It's almost like the alcoholic who gets off of alcohol. He still has to be very careful, like maybe not going to bars or whatever the case may be, because there's a trigger that wasn't there before he became an alcoholic that now he lives with. And the same thing with the obese person. You're of age like me, so you remember The Biggest Loser that was on TV.
Yes.
A lot of these guys gained the weight back, even with them exercising and dieting, because they changed their metabolic profile, and their metabolic profile was totally just messed up. So for them to get to that level and stay there, is very difficult. Very difficult. Not impossible.
Sure.
There are people who, when they come off the medicine, they can gain some of the weight, but not all of it back. But it's not like, okay, once I get down, this is my new set point, because your body has been in this situation for how many years? It's been forever.
Yes.
And you've become accustomed to it. I tell people the standard person, how tall are you?
5'6".
So 5'6". So say I know a lot of 5'6" people who are 200 pounds. So that means you're at least technically, or at least 40 pounds overweight for your height.
Okay.
Now, what I like to do is I go get one of these water bottles, the big water 5-gallon water bottles, and I get them hold it. That's 48 pounds. I say, how does that feel to you? Because you walk up the stairs with that, you go to sleep with that, you have sex with that, you play games with that. You don't even notice it, but that's the kind of weight that you carry around. So you wonder why your back hurts. You wonder why you get headaches. Why you're just generally always tired. You can't understand it. It slows down the process of blood flowing down to your legs and back up. If you get that off of you, how does it feel?
Wow.
This is the kind of thing that your body's really good at protecting you from yourself. You don't realize it that you're carrying it because you just feel sick.
Yeah.
So you function, but people function ill. We function unhealthy. And that has to change. But that's a mindset not just of an individual, it's a culture. In the black community, I like them big boned. We're not supposed to be that thin. There's an image in our heads. And I challenge a lot of them. I say, how thin were you when you were in your 20s? Well, I was about that weight. I said, but you didn't think yourself were ill there. I said, no, yeah, you're right. I wasn't. But the image of what we expect from ourselves can change over our life, and so we expect less, and so we get less. But there's a price to be paid. Dementia is a huge problem right now, and we're going to pay for that as a community as well. That's a whole other topic.
And real quick, what would you say are some of the causes of dementia? Is it the same thing?
So there's a question of how much of that is still going to be lifestyle. So if we look at some countries where this isn't a thing, then they don't see it as much.
Okay.
But the problem also becomes that are there environmental factors as well? So we talk about the forever plastics in your food. We talk about some of the vaccines that we've been getting, or all of the vaccines that we've been getting.
Okay.
But some of the stuff, unless we have, if for no other reason, if we can at least get our public health to do better statistics of what's going on in this island. Because me as a doctor, I should know how much diabetes is in it. I should know the population. I should know cancer clusters.
Yes.
I should know if there's a cancer cluster by Belco Tower or up in Somerset next to the 5G tower. I should know these things. And it's easy because we have a small population. But somebody has to be willing to go out, collect the data, put it together, publicize it. I should know. Technically, as a doctor, I know we don't publicize suicides in terms of, but I should know how many suicides, because if there's a problem amongst our young people, somebody should be keeping track of that.
That's interesting. Okay.
But these are the things that the average Joe is not going to be thinking about. Right. But that is public health. Yeah. That's where your public health should be really good. But we pay this guy a lot of money. He's a good doctor, but we don't ask much of him. You go on every time we see something about public health, it's our minister who's a lawyer. We need our doctors to step up and do what we need them to do, but we have to give them the tools necessary to do it.
Got you. Okay. Any final comments?
Live long and prosper. I mean, literally, that's what we want people to do. We want people to live. I'll leave you with this. I listened the other night, and there was a concept of your lifespan and your health span. So your lifespan might be 85. But if your health span is 70, that means for 15 years, you're going to be living very ill.
Wow.
Because in the old days, we said once we retired and stuff, we died in X amount of time, and that was it. So our lifespan and our health span, but we died, we were functional, we weren't like in bed, crippled, or anything like that. And now we have people that live in a hospital, that live in nursing homes, that don't have functionality, who have had strokes and all that kind of stuff, but they don't die. We're very proud of keeping people alive, but we don't keep people healthy.
Wow.
So you have to really, reassess. Are you living a life now while you are quote unquote healthy that's going to give you that same feeling after you are retired or stop working or whatever? Or is that going to be taken away from you? Because the reality is that's a horrible thing to live your last part of your life just sick.
Well, Okay, well, I hope we can bring that to a reality, and we can all better understand and appreciate that now, as hard as it is, prepare ourselves, because, again, who wants to live that long period of time and not be able to function?
But we don't think about it. I mean, like you talked about the young guys and girls who own those bikes, driving it. They don't think about tomorrow and what ifs.
Sure.
They're just enjoying the moment.
Gotcha.
And that's the problem. We don't think about future. We got to think about our future.
Gotcha. All right. Well, again, thank you very much. To the listening audience, thank you so much for joining us here again on Magic 102.7 on your Sunday evening edition of Insight. We'll be back next week, and we're going to do, again, some more discussions in terms of healthcare. And I do have one person, I'm not going to tell you who that person is right now, who is I want to call it an icon in the health field. They're going to come on board and just discuss what they've done. For some reason, though, many people are reluctant to talk about different things. I want to come and let's have information, let's have interchange. And what I will say, that's not for tonight, though, is that Bermuda is going to go through one of its biggest changes in October, and that's going to be the election of a new leader of the PLP and by default the country, right? You'll be surprised how many people I've asked to come and talk about leadership, and they're all saying no. And my word,
saying no, what do you mean?
Afraid to come.
Oh, they don't want to come.
Yeah, and very often it's because they feel if they talk about it, they're going to be blackballed. I'm not saying come and support Minister Hayward or MP. What you call him? So it's Curtis Dickinson. I'm not saying do that. I'm saying to come and just talk generally about leadership. Leaders are afraid to do so. And so that's my thing. So I'm going to do it myself, I suppose, because it's not saying you support one or the other. It's more a matter of what do we think Bermuda needs right now as a leader? And then you could put those two to that, as opposed to right now, we're just afraid to talk about it. It's horrible.
I get in trouble a lot because I tell people, I mean, I'm a Bermudian, I'm not American, but I told them at the last election I would have definitely voted for Trump over, because I say in Bermuda, like most places, it's two choices. And I don't vote party, I vote policy.
Okay.
And especially as a Christian, I have certain non-negotiables in my life that I will say, this, and this. And if you don't fulfill this, then, I might like you as a person,
right,
but I can't vote for you as a leader of my country.
Okay.
And I think if people start thinking about policies, and every time, that's why I always call myself an independent, because when it comes time to vote for people, I do list.
Yeah.
I run down lists of policies, and then I say, what does this person believe? What does this person believe? And then I add up my list.
Wow.
Because in the end, I have to live with the policies.
Yes.
I can, the person might change here or there, but those policies are usually going to be ingrained for a while.
Nice. Okay.
So if people get out of their head, because I have people all the time that say, listen, I just can't see myself, even though they might be really upset with the current leadership, they can't see themselves voting for the other people.
Right.
But in my mind, I'm like, I'm not going to destroy the future of my island, myself, and my family because I like somebody, because they happen to be the same color of me. Because believe me, I am, my grandmother was president of the UNIA in Canada. I've seen where black people got messed over by black people.
Oh yeah, clearly.
So if we think that just because they're the same color as us, that they won't, or because they're the opposite color of us, they won't give us a break,
right,
then I think we're all going to be, we are in a lot of trouble, because that's part of the divisiveness that we still see in today's thing. We have to get past that. There's no way around it now. I mean, if you go out and if you drive home in the afternoon, how many people I see more different colors than just plain black and white.
Sure.
Bermuda has already changed, whether you like it or not. Yeah. And if you don't get in line with that philosophy, all you're going to be is angry.
Yes, yeah, that's crazy. Yeah,
it's crazy.
Yeah. Okay. Well, again, listen, audience, thank you very much. Please, one more time, if you're out early or late, wear a high visibility vest, a light or something to let people know, because now what's happening is, even if it's like, for me, maybe say around 6 or 7, when it's daylight or even nighttime, right? People in all black, you don't see them right away. And you're driving, suddenly they pop out from the sidewalk, and that is dangerous, because I need to have as much notice as possible that you're on the street, even if I'm driving sensibly, you know what I mean? And so please wear a high visibility vest or a light or something. And those of us that operate vehicles, please slow down so that we can ensure that there are less collisions, less injuries, and please let's hopefully avoid any more road fatalities.
I actually encourage people to walk on trails or on fields and stuff, because those hard surfaces are horrible for your joints.
There you go, you're a doctor. Well done. Okay, Bermuda, until next week, God willing, thank you very much. Yeah.
You've been listening to Insight. Please join Anthony again next Sunday for insight here on Magic 102.7 FM.